This story began in the Empire of Lanark, at the residence of Grand Duke Winthrop. Two women in almost identical uniforms stood next to each other and were asked if they were the new nannies, Bella and Evelyn. The question was asked by a gray-haired man in a black suit, who introduced himself as the butler of the Grand Duke's residence, Alan. The women followed him to the entrance of the huge mansion, because he said that from now on they would be responsible for the young master's entire daily routine. Therefore, the first thing to do was to carefully study the layout of the estate. Alan said the owner wasn't too picky, but he'd been at war for a long time and was sensitive to rules and regulations, so the entire staff had to be more careful. The nannies were shown the residence's reception area and explained that unless a guest is particularly important, they are usually received here. One of the women's attention was drawn to a large portrait in a luxurious frame that hung on the wall, and she wanted to know who this man was. This was His Grace, the Grand Duke Ryan Winthrop. The woman thought he looked exactly as she had imagined him. She had finally gotten here to see him. This story was called The Bloody Throne and the Silver Oath. The Emperor's illegitimate son, Cale Winthrop, meets Duke Rutherford just before an assassination attempt and is taken into the Duke's family as an adopted son, but by the will of fate he falls in love with the Duke's daughter and, in order to be with his beloved, decides to regain his true status. At that time, in the Empire of Lanark, the tyranny of Emperor Hadrian Winthrop was growing stronger every day. Cale, having left the Duke's house, joined the rebels and showed outstanding ingenuity. The rebels eventually succeed in executing the emperor, but the joy of victory did not last long. The rebel leader, the emperor's nephew, Aaron Winthrop, whom everyone trusted, reveals his ambitions and leads the empire to ruin. Cale, unable to bear to watch this horror, personally executes even Aaron Winthrop. Then he proves his origin and ascends the throne. And finally, he takes his beloved as empress. It was a historical moment when the darkness enveloping the Lanark Empire finally dissipated. The emperor looks at his pierced chest, typed the girl sitting at the computer. That was the plot of the novel she wrote at night, torn between two jobs. She thought painfully that she had already edited this text countless times. The appearance of the final boss, Aaron, was so important, but she was so unbearably sleepy, and she did not have the strength to finally finish this chapter in order to fully pay off the loans for the younger student's education. The girl's head was simply splitting with pain. She fell to the floor without finishing the chapter, feeling like she was dying from exhaustion. Her life had not been particularly good, so she had nothing to regret. Only one last regret remained. She never finished the novel she had poured so much love into. The skies were so cruel. The final villain had appeared. The end was so near. "Madam, are you awake?" She heard someone's unfamiliar voice very close by. She woke up lying in an unfamiliar bed. She didn't understand what happened. She remained alive. This could mean that someone took her to the hospital. She sat up in bed and asked what kind of place it was, whether it was a hospital with a new concept. The atmosphere was similar to a VIP ward, but the girl never had money for such a thing. She really wanted it to be a dream. She pinched herself, and from the pain she realized that everything around her was real. The maid standing nearby said that Lady Vienna needed to get ready quickly because an important guest was expected to arrive that afternoon. The girl asked again, and the maid added worriedly that the Count might soon start swearing. The maid continued to ask something. "Count Vienna." These words were familiar to her. If this had not been a dream, it would have turned out that she had found herself in her own novel. But the worst thing was to find myself in this novel, in the role of a character who dies without saying a single line. This simply could not happen. With these thoughts, she soon wandered along the path through the garden. She had managed to move into a third-rate character, Vienna Tyrant. Why couldn't she move into a rich merchant's wife, or, for example, a queen? The Tangerines were a family of corrupt aristocrats who supported the tyrant emperor, Hadrian Winthrop. The current head, Count Tyrant, in order to curry favor with the emperor, sent several of his daughters to be his concubines. He is simply a real scum of society. Now it would be a good idea to figure out exactly what moment in time we ended up in. It was obvious that Count Tyrant had not yet sold Vienna to the harem. The maids were loudly discussing the news today. Duke Ryan Winthrop was supposed to return, and now he was not just a duke. His Majesty had granted him the title of Grand Duke. They said that he was so handsome that even men fell in love with him, so the maids were going to go and see him when they finished their work, although one of the girls said that she did not see much point in it. What was the use of the beauty of a man who was the brother of the emperor, and therefore no different from him? Vienna realized that she should focus on the day of the return of Rayan, who was a hero of the Empire, the brother of the Emperor and the father of Aaron Winthrop, to the capital. The maid said that an important guest would arrive today, and since it was a guest who arrived at the same time as Rayan's return, it meant that today Vienna would be given as a concubine to the Emperor. A few days after arriving at the palace, Vienna will die at the hands of the Emperor simply because she looked away. The girl thought that she could not die such a dog's death, and therefore she needed to run right now. She jumped up and ran away, and the maids exclaimed how long she had been there. At sunset, the maid asked if the mistress was ready. She said that if the lady had finished dressing, she could go down to the hall. She entered the room and saw Vienna's almost completely empty wardrobe. At this time, Vienna was already far from home, on the evening streets of the city. She walked, holding her hat, and thought that she hadn't even imagined that escaping would be so easy. There was no security at all in the Count's house, and, if you believe the clichés of all stories about time travelers, she was already dead in the real world. She lived so hard, wrote, met with fans, listened to admiring comments about what an interesting novel she had written, and then died so absurdly. The response to this work was excellent. They even set a date for an autograph session. But now, who knows? If Vienna doesn't die here and holds out longer, maybe she will be able to return to her reality someday. In any case, she grabbed all the valuable jewelry, so now she can think about how to make herself comfortable. "You're dreaming," some guy exclaimed, snatching the bag from the stunned Vienna's hands. Vienna was robbed, and in a very brazen manner, but the bag contained her entire fortune. "Hey, you thief! Stop!" Vienna shouted, chasing after the thief, but he still had no intention of stopping. But his escape was thwarted by one of the passers-by, who intervened in an unexpected way, causing the thief to stumble with a clever trip. The thief fell to the ground as if he had been mown down. The young man with red hair took Vienna's bag in his hands. He said that he immediately noticed how the thief was creeping up on the lady in a very suspicious manner, and as he expected, the thief did just that. He told the thief to get lost and added that if he was caught again, he should not expect mercy. The red-haired young man returned Vienna's property to her and advised her not to walk alone in the evenings anymore. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and thanked him. "The sun hadn't set yet, and they were already trying to rob me," Vienna said. The red-haired stranger noticed that, judging by her clothes, she was a noble lady, so it was unclear to him why she left the house alone, without servants. With a nervous laugh, Vienna replied that she was simply bored because she couldn't tell him that she had run away from home. The red-haired stranger thought the girl looked like a runaway aristocrat, but her manner of speech was anything but noble. He told her that the streets were unsafe and that she needed to keep an eye on her things so she wouldn't be robbed again, and then said goodbye. "Wait," said the girl. "She would at least like to know the name of the person who helped her so much today." The stranger laughed and said that he was only doing his duty, but since the lady asked, he would answer. His name was Edward Kamar, and he was the bodyguard of His Highness the Emperor. Vienna immediately remembered the name. The stranger turned out to be the Emperor's right hand, someone who did not shy away from any atrocities. Edward asked why the lady was so surprised. Vienna replied that she was simply surprised that she had received help from such an important person, and she thought that her surprise was natural, since her savior was too different from the Edward she knew. Edward explained that this was also part of his duties. The capital had been so unsettled lately, and the lady should be more careful. Vienna thought that she had lived to see strange times, had received help from a villain, and now she needed to quickly find a safe place to spend the night before it got dark. By the way, she left without thinking at all, but now she didn't even know where to go. If she had also been robbed, everything could have ended very badly. Even though this was the world of a novel she had written herself, she could not know absolutely everything that was happening here. She only understood that a tyrant emperor was currently running amok here. In a feudal society where politics is in chaos, security is always a problem. The common people who have nothing to eat or wear will do anything to survive, and so Vienna needs to think carefully about where to go to survive herself. The main characters of the story were still children, and the Duchy of Rutherford, where they live, is closely connected to the Count of Tangerine, so this was not an option first. It was necessary to find someone who did not know the Count and Vienna. The girl thought that such a character really existed. And this was the Grand Duke Rayan, whom the maids had spoken of earlier. Adrian Winthrop, the firstborn who seized power in the Imperial Winthrop family, and his younger brother was precisely Rayan Winthrop. He was a hero who saved the country, a favorite of the people, but in the end he had to die unjustly at the hands of the emperor. 10 years later, Rayan's son, Aaron Winthrop, driven by a thirst for revenge against the emperor, will gather a rebel army and carry out his revenge. He will say that his enemy has no idea how long he has been waiting for this moment, and, consumed by madness, will continue the endless slaughter. "It's almost over now, father," he will declare, for his goal was to destroy the empire. This was the emergence of the true villain hiding in the shadow of the tyrant emperor. Due to the emperor's jealousy, Rayan always remained on the border, so he hardly knew Count Tangerine. Since Rayan is still alive, it means that Aaron has not yet gone over to the dark side, and Rayan Winthrop was the character who loved the people more than all the other heroes in this story. Although he may be a bit rude, he treats his servants generously, so in order to survive here, the best option might be to get a job at the Grand Duke's residence under a different name. "Look, he has arrived," people exclaimed in the streets. He was a hero to them, a war hero. They admired him. They begged the Grand Duke to save them from the tyranny of the emperor. They believed that since His Serene Highness the Grand Duke had arrived, life would now get better, because it could not be otherwise. The hero of the Lannic Empire's war, Grand Duke Rayan Winthrop, looked at all this and thought that it had been a long time since he had returned to the capital. He could not have imagined that during this time the emperor's reputation would deteriorate so much. He did not know what his brother had planned. People waved their hands after his horse, asking him to take care of them, the common people. At the palace, His Majesty was informed that Grand Duke Rayan Winthrop was requesting an audience. The Emperor of the Lannic Empire, Hadrian Winthrop, ordered the guest to be admitted. The Duke bowed to greet the son of the Empire, His Majesty. His Majesty said that the hero of Lannic did not need to be so polite. Duke Rayan bowed his head and said that he was His Majesty's eternal servant. No matter how many merits he had accumulated, they all belonged only to His Majesty. "Very well," said the Emperor, and ordered the Duke to rise from his knees. The Emperor said he had heard that while the Duke was returning home victorious, the inhabitants of the capital fell on their faces and solemnly greeted him. Rayan replied that the rumors had simply become overgrown with unnecessary details. The Emperor said that when Rayan was born, there was a prophecy that in the future this boy would become the savior of the empire, and now the people call him by this word. Rayan replied that these were only the flattering words of those who wanted to curry favor with the imperial family. The words about a savior were nothing more than nonsense that a wise emperor would never believe, because these words were completely absurd. "True," said the emperor, and then added that if he had believed such a thing, he would not have granted Rayan the title of Grand Duke, and now he was merely worried that, intoxicated by the crowd's jubilation, Rayan would begin to harbor vain hopes. Rayan assured His Majesty that he could rest assured that the Duke was well aware of the duty entrusted to him, and would therefore fulfill it conscientiously, and would never do anything to harm his homeland, the Lannic Empire. The Emperor said that this was good. The Duke had come a long way, so now it was time for him to return to his own estate. As the Duke headed for the door of the throne room, the Emperor turned to Edward and asked if his bodyguard would believe these words. Edward replied that yes, and whether his words coincided with his thoughts could be verified by observing the actions of the Grand Duke. The Emperor said that it seemed he had done the right thing in summoning Rayan to the capital. At the estate, Rayan asked the butler Alan if His Majesty had not said that he would entrust the repairs of the estate to the palace servants, and Alan replied that this was exactly what he had been told, and everything became clear to Duke Rayan. He said that tomorrow it would be worth hiring people to renovate the mansion. Alan noticed that His Majesty had granted him the title of Grand Duke, summoned him to the capital, and personally prepared the residence, or rather, the Emperor spoke of it as if he were doing him a favor, and it was so offensive for Rayan. "Enough," said Rayan, and noted that since that was the case, they just needed to do their jobs. The Duke asked Alan where Aaron was, and the butler replied that the young master, as always, was following the schedule set by the Duke, and that he had now finished his meal and was in the imperial history lesson. Rayan asked if they had found a nanny. Alan replied that he had been recommended to through a servant who worked for them further. They would probably arrive at the estate in about a week. The Duke said that the butler could hire as many people as needed to ensure that the repairs were completed within a week. And so a week passed. Duke Rayan appeared on the threshold with his adjutant Owen. Butler Alan introduced the master to two new nannies, Bella and Evelyn. Vienna thought she would have to get used to being called Bella from now on. She could not enter the Grand Duke's house as a Tangerine person, so she bought a suitable identity with the jewels she took with her. Bella, who had to give up her newborn child and, in essence, sell herself to the Duke's house, and whom Vienna offered to go in her place only to exchange names with her, had no reason at all to refuse such an offer. And now Duke Rayan sternly said that he had just familiarized himself with the provided dossiers, and Vienna thought with fear that he could have guessed everything. But the Duke asked her if her name was Bella. Then he told Alan to take them and tell them about all the rules of the estate, and the butler said that his lordship did not need to worry about it. "This way," said the butler, addressing the new nannies. The Duke turned to Owen and reminded him that he had said he had a report. The adjutant replied that, as his lordship had ordered, he had checked the tax revenues for the last few years. As the Duke had said, the taxes were high and the people's discontent was growing. Rayan agreed that there was a lot of work to be done, and then ordered that the identities of these new nannies be checked, especially the one named Bella. Owen asked whether his lordship had any specific suspicions. Rayan replied that she looked too young, her skin was white, and her body was flawless, completely healthy. He clarified that she did not look like a woman who had given birth to a child and wandered in poverty. She could have been a spy sent by the Duke's brother, and therefore she needed to be checked. Meanwhile, the new nannies learned that the young master's meals were held strictly according to the rules. Alan explained that the menu was also determined by the owner himself, so the cooking had to be done strictly according to it. Dinner was strictly until 5 o'clock in the evening, after which the meal stopped if you were caught eating sweets. Punishment followed according to military regulations. From Vienna's point of view, it looked like intermittent fasting, and even a strict diet, for a child who hadn't even gone to school yet. Alan shouted at her that she could learn the rules later, but now she had to hurry after him. The nannies were shown the young master's room, and it was explained that on ordinary days they would live in the servants' room, and on duty days they would take turns sleeping in a special small room nearby. Alan explained that the young master must get up every morning at 6 o'clock. The most important thing is to wake him up on time, not to dress or wash him. The owner of the estate is very pedantic, so there should be no lateness. Evelyn bowed, folding her arms across her chest, and said that she would follow these rules no matter what happened. Vienna remembered how to bow here. She repeated the second nanny's gesture and promised Alan, the butler, to strictly follow all the rules. "Come on," Alan said, and Vienna thought that if she continued to follow the others, she would probably soon master the etiquette of this world. The three of them walked out of the mansion and across the large courtyard to inspect the training grounds. Soon they saw a wooden block, the kind they usually use to practice blows with cold weapons. Someone was training there now, under the advice to concentrate and hit harder. On the training grounds there was a small boy and an adult man who was giving orders. The boy was young Master Aaron Winthrop. Alan explained that young Master Aaron always works very hard to live up to the expectations of His Grace the Grand Duke. Vienna realized that this child was that very Aaron. It was very hard to believe that this little boy was the novel's main villain, Aaron Winthrop. She thought that she herself had made such a pure and sweet child a villain. As the author, she was simply a disgusting person. She wanted to ask the boy for forgiveness for this. The reason Aaron became a villain was the death of his father, Rayan Winthrop. But what if Rayan doesn't die? If Aaron doesn't have to go through the pain of losing his father, maybe then he will live a completely different life. Meanwhile, Alan explained that, as the owner had established, the young master trains from morning until noon, during which time no one should disturb him. He needed to be served after the end of training. Both nannies nodded in agreement, but Vienna thought that the number of rules that must be followed was enormous. Alan drew the new nanny's attention to the clock hands. It was time for the break, during which the new maids were to greet the young master. They walked up to the boy and curtsied ceremoniously as Alan announced that they were the new nannies, Bella and Evelyn. "Okay," Aaron said, looking at the women he didn't know. Vienna noticed with alarm that the boy was sweating strangely and excessively, and also looked pale. Alan said that from today on they would take care of the young master, and then asked him to choose his personal nanny from among them, to which Aaron clarified whether it was necessary to make this choice. He extended his hand, pointed his finger at one of the strangers, and said that then let it be her. Aaron chose Evelyn as his personal nanny. With a feeling of inner superiority, Evelyn stared at Vienna, who did not understand this triumph, as if someone was fighting for this job. Alan told Vienna to go to the kitchen, light a fire, and heat water for the young master's bath. The girl obediently bowed and suddenly remembered that she didn't know how to light a fire. At that moment, Vienna was stopped by another thought. Was it really true? "Wait!" she cried, rushing towards Aaron. Evely crossed her arms over her chest and asked what was going on. The young gentleman had already chosen her as his personal nanny, and Bella should go and do her own thing. Bella squatted down in front of Aaron and asked if his chest hurt when he breathed, if he felt discomfort in his throat when he slept, if it was harder for him to lift his sword than usual. The boy asked in surprise how she knew this. Alan approached them and asked what was going on. Bella replied that she thought the young gentleman was ill and that if he didn't start treatment immediately, his life could be in danger. What are you talking about?" Alan shouted loudly at that moment. Bella noticed a distinctive bruise on the boy's neck, explaining that such symptoms often appear with lung problems. She also noticed increased sweating and extreme pallor, and she was right. The cause was most likely excessive exercise with difficulty breathing. "I'll send for a doctor immediately," Alan shouted. Soon the boy was in his bed, and the Duke came to inquire about his state of health. After examining the boy, the visiting doctor reported that, as the nanny had said, it was a lung disease. If they had not detected it in time and the bleeding had continued, disaster would have happened. The doctor said that he would prepare a medicine that would need to be taken every day. Butler Alan saw the doctor off when he had finished his work. The Duke approached the boy's bedside and asked why Aaron had not told anyone that he was ill. Aaron, embarrassed, replied that he was simply afraid that his father would be disappointed in him. Rayan was surprised and asked what he was talking about, why he should be disappointed in him. Irvin replied that his lordship also returns from the battlefield wounded, so he too can do what his father does. Rayan countered that Aaron wasn't an adult, and this wasn't a battlefield, so he never had to hide his condition again. "Yes, father," said the boy, and Rayan said that was good, but he had things to do, so he would go from here. Aaron replied that he wished his father to also rest and take care of his health. Bella thought the boy had an incredibly sad look. He probably just wanted to be with his dad a little longer. Rayan asked Bella if she was the first to notice Aaron's condition. The girl replied that everything was correct. "Well done," said Rayan, and then asked how a simple nanny could notice what even Alan had ignored. He suggested that she had once studied medicine. Bella replied that her younger brother loved martial arts as a child. He often got injured, and by caring for him, she was able to learn it herself. Rayan said that her experience taking care of her brother saved Aaron, so she should continue to keep a close eye on him. Then the Duke left. Vienna breathed a sigh of relief. Evelyn glanced at her unkindly. This girl, Bella, was really interfering with her plans. She needed to take action against her as soon as possible. That night, Vienna sat in her room at the table studying some papers. She, of course, settled into the Grand Duke's residence without much thought, but if you think about it, it wasn't at all safe here either. The Emperor will soon begin to put pressure on Rayana, and since she has entered the duchy, Rayana must be protected. On the surface, the Emperor appears to be a stupid reveler and tyrant, but in reality, all this is just a mask. In reality, he is calculating and cunning, like a poisonous snake. Bella didn't understand how she could protect Rayan from the tyrant emperor, because according to the plot, Rayan was supposed to die at the hands of an assassin sent by the emperor, and Bella didn't have any fighting skills to fight an assassin. She could have advised Rayan not to contradict the emperor and live quietly and under the grass, but she understood that, most likely, this would not work. Because Rayan was the embodiment of honesty and incorruptibility, he simply would not be able to calmly watch the emperor's outrages. Then there was the second option: she could hold out here for a little while and then escape. But she had experienced firsthand how cruel the outside world was, and if it was the same everywhere, it was still much safer to survive under the wing of a powerful man like Rayan. Therefore, it was decided to first win Rayan's trust at any cost and become his reliable ally, and to do this, it was necessary to find an approach to the Duke's son, Aaron. Aaron turned out to be a kind and well-mannered boy. He never even complained when he had to drink bitter medicine, because he had not yet fully recovered. Seeing how attached Aaron had become to Bella, Alan the butler appointed her as his personal nanny, and Aaron soon made a full recovery. They attended his classes together and sometimes got scolded for nodding off. They walked and spent almost all their time together until bedtime. Moreover, Vienna learned that Rayan cared about Aaron much more than it seemed at first glance, but he was simply not able to express his feelings at all. Seeing how much Rayan and Aaron cherished each other, Vienna felt that the Duke's residence, which she had chosen only for the sake of survival, began to feel like a real home. At the table, Vienna asked the young gentleman to look at what she had brought. She showed Aaron the cheese cookies she had specially prepared for him. Aaron replied that it was almost lunchtime and he couldn't eat sweets before eating. Vienna said in a conspiratorial tone that there was still plenty of time before lunch, so a little was fine, and she wouldn't say anything to the owner. But at that moment, Alan burst into the dining room and sternly asked if Bella didn't know the rules regarding the young master's snacks. All cookies would be confiscated. While taking the cookies away, he did not hesitate to try one and said that it was very tasty. Vienna snorted that Alan apparently wanted to eat the cookies himself, and then she stuck her tongue out at the butler. She said she would bake more later, but Aaron said that it was not necessary, otherwise Alan would get fat. Evelyn overheard this conversation, gloomily watching Bella's rapid rapprochement with the young master. A few days later, at the residence of the Grand Duke of Winthrop, Rayan was sitting in a chair and carefully reading some book. Vienna peeked through the half-open door and said that she would like to talk to him about young Master Aaron. Rayan assumed that the conversation would be about Aaron's birthday. Vienna replied that she would like to throw a party in honor of the young master's birthday. Rayan thought that he had been at the border for a long time and really couldn't celebrate Aaron's birthdays properly, so now he told Bella to tell him more about everything she had planned. The girl said that, like the master, all the servants also prepare gifts for the young master with all their hearts. Bella was going to bake a beautiful and delicious cake from the freshest ingredients. The Duke didn't have to worry about the food at the party either. She was planning to set a sumptuous table to make everyone happy. Vienna felt like she was presenting the party menu to a stern chef, trying to persuade him to trust her with it, but Rayan listened and told her to continue. Encouraged by the Duke's initial reaction, Vienna suggested inviting young ladies and gentlemen of the young gentleman's age. This could be an excellent opportunity for him to make new friends and gain experience in socializing. Parties are good when there are a lot of people, so their parents could be invited too. Rayan replied that this was out of the question, and Bella didn't understand why. Rayan said he didn't think he had to report to her every decision he made. "I beg your pardon, master," Bella said, lowering her head. She realized that she had started arguing completely by accident, but she couldn't forget that this was a class society. Rayan suddenly softened and said that Bella might not have known all this, but the political situation was unstable right now, so this was not the best time to invite strangers into the house. Vienna herself was amazed that she could have forgotten this. The Emperor was probably keeping an eye on Rayan. If she threw a lavish reception, the Emperor might decide that the Duke was gathering supporters for a conspiracy. She was simply too immersed in her role as Bella's nanny and lost sight of all this. Bella pressed her hand to her chest and said that she had been short-sighted. His lordship had just returned to the capital. Now really was not the time for celebrations. She just wanted the young master to have happy memories of his childhood. But at the same time, she really had not thought about the political consequences. Rayan thought about her words, about the happy memories from his childhood. Aaron would probably enjoy the party with his peers. It's so much fun to spend his birthday with friends. Rayan cleared his throat and said that he had not answered everything that had been proposed definitively. He said he thought it would be possible to have a small celebration with his family and servants. Vienna beamed and thought that Aaron would be happy with even a modest party with his family. Rayan was constantly missing on the battlefield, so each year of his birthday passed unnoticed, so he is ready to entrust Bella with organizing this celebration. Bella bowed her thanks for his trust and promised to make every effort to live up to his lordship's expectations. She headed for the door, but Rayan stopped her with a loud shout. Bella asked if his lordship had any other assignments for her. Rayan wanted to know Bella's opinion on what would be the best gift for Aaron. The girl realized he was asking her opinion, and that was a sign he had finally begun to trust her, which was great, but now she needed to give him some practical advice. Bella said that it is not so difficult to understand children. What is more important to them is not expensive gifts, but those that convey love. "Love?" Rayan asked, puzzled. With a smile, Bella said that it would be great if Rayan made something for the boy with his own hands. "Well, I'll take my leave now," said the girl, and rushed out of the room, leaving the Duke to ponder what kind of gift could be that would convey love. At this time in the imperial palace, the Emperor received the tax revenue for this month. The Emperor's envoy checked everything. The revenue had decreased by about a third compared to the previous month. "Why so little?" the Emperor exclaimed indignantly. The envoy explained that due to famine and natural disasters, the people's income had fallen. There were already too many victims, and so the people would like to ask for a reduction in taxes. The Emperor snorted dismissively. These beggars should have been forgotten. The lords should have been told that they would collect more, and whoever had land would somehow manage to pay. The envoy looked at His Majesty with astonishment. He bowed and remarked to His Majesty that this was not possible. They already paid tribute every year, but due to the drought and crop failure, their income had also fallen, and the demand to raise taxes would cause strong discontent. The emperor smiled and said that it was he who had given them these lands. If they were dissatisfied, they could return their possessions, and if they were afraid of a rebellion, they could collect taxes under the pretext of helping the victims. "Yes, Your Majesty," the envoy said with a bow. "Ah, yes," said the emperor, remembering something. He had granted lands to Rayan, who had recently returned. Now he too could be considered a lord. The envoy asked if His Majesty wanted to make an example out of this man for others. The emperor replied that he grasped everything on the fly, and that was what he liked about his assistant. The envoy said that he understood His Majesty. He would deal with this as needed. His Majesty could rely on him. The emperor said with a laugh that he had gotten his hands on an incredibly useful man. A dark shadow descended the steps leading from the throne. Meanwhile, Bella Vienna was enthusiastically working on the dough, humming a love song. One of the maids ran into the kitchen and announced that the butler was looking for Bella and said that they needed to discuss the details of the upcoming birthday party. "Yes, I'm already running," Bella responded. It was some kind of strange story. Butler Allen said he wasn't looking for Bella at all. But be that as it may, while she could have finished the cake, Rayan doesn't like sweets, so Vienna was going to bake him a refreshing lemon cake. This was a great chance to score some more sympathy points. Suddenly, Vienna noticed something strange. And then it was time to celebrate Aaron's birthday. "Here comes the hero of the occasion," Bella announced, leading the boy with his eyes closed to the place of the celebration. "Happy birthday, Mr. Aaron," Bella announced joyfully. A festive dinner table with lots of delicious food appeared before the boy. The room was decorated with balloons and candles. Aaron looked at all this magnificence, and Bella admired the boy's reaction. "Wow!" Aaron exclaimed when he realized that all of this was prepared especially for him. It was so beautiful. Aaron had never seen anything like it in his life. Bella said that it was the owner who ordered the party to be held in honor of the young master's birthday. He regretted that he couldn't congratulate Aaron properly before, and this time he wanted to do everything perfectly. "Thank you, Father," Aaron exclaimed, turning to the Duke. It was unexpected for Rayan that the boy would be so happy about everything. Looking at how happy Aaron was, the Duke himself couldn't help but smile. Aaron hugged his father with a smile and thanked him for everything, telling him how happy he was. Rayan watched the boy with interest. He said that he was also very happy. Vienna admired them both. She was satisfied with the results of her continuous efforts. Now in this house it really felt like they were raising a baby here, whereas before it was impossible to tell whether this was a house or a barracks. "Your Grace!" A loud cry suddenly rang out. One of the ducal guards ran in and exclaimed that he asked to leave here for a minute. There was an uninvited guest. The guest was already entering, smilingly declaring that calling him an uninvited guest was too rude. He did not understand at all, since when he had become uninvited for the Grand Duke. Vienna recognized Hick. She didn't understand what he was doing there because she wasn't allowed to meet him. She turned away in agitation, begging him not to recognize her. The guest noticed the magnificently laid table. He said that since today was the Duke's son's birthday, and since he was here today, it would be improper for him to come empty-handed. The guest took out the blade he had brought with him. The guard immediately rushed between him and the others, snatching his own sword from its sheath. The guest explained that this was a dagger that had been passed down in their family from generation to generation. He himself had received it as a child, having defeated his older brother. The guest handed the dagger to Aaron and said that it was a gift for him. Aaron turned to his father, asking for permission with his eyes. "You can take it," Rayan told him. The guest wished him to become a strong man who always gets what he wants, just like he himself was, who once got this dagger. Then Rayan ordered the butler Alan to take Aaron away. Bella took the boy by the hand and they walked past the guest to leave the room. The guest turned his attention to the girl, realizing that he had seen this silhouette somewhere before. Rayan asked him how he ended up in this wilderness. The guest asked with a laugh why such questions were being asked. Since the Duke understood perfectly well what his job was, he had come to convey His Majesty's order. During a conversation with His Majesty's envoy, Rayan learned that there were now plans to collect additional funds from the lords for the relief fund. The Emperor assumed that if the Grand Duke was the first to show generosity, the others would simply be unable to help but follow his example. Rayan asked him not to worry. If it was for the sake of helping the victims, he would of course pay. The guest bowed and said that since the Grand Duke was so accommodating, that could be the end of it. He was about to leave when Rayan suddenly asked which region exactly all these funds would be sent to. I had to respond with a kind smile and an assurance that they would be sent where they were most needed. Rayan agreed that he was probably worrying for nothing, and the Emperor's envoy was finally able to take his leave. The man from the guard said that the guest had finally left. He did not really believe that His Majesty had suddenly decided to help the victims. Rayan didn't believe it either, so he decided to believe Edward. It looked more like the Emperor had no plans to send money to disaster areas. And from Edward's reaction it was completely obvious. He pretended that he didn't know anything. He wouldn't openly report the theft. Rayan gave his assistant a message and asked him to find a reliable person and spread rumors about it. Alan approached Rayan and asked if the master would order the celebration to end. The Duke replied with a slight smile that Aaron should be brought back because the party was just getting started. Everyone returned and Rayan invited Aaron to open the gift he had prepared for him. "Wow!" the boy exclaimed. "There was a wooden doll in the box." Aaron suddenly asked if it was him. Rayan replied that it was indeed Aaron. Rayan hadn't carved anything for a long time, so his skill was not what it used to be, so if the boy didn't like it, he would prepare another gift. But Aaron exclaimed that this was enough for him. He assured his father that this was the best gift he had ever received. He said that he would keep this doll until he died. "That's how it is," Rayan said thoughtfully. Bella joyfully exclaimed that now it was time to eat cake. As soon as the hero of the occasion made a wish and blew out the candles, they would cut the cake. Bella told the young master to make a wish. The cake was very beautiful. Aaron wished that he and his father would always be together. Then the boy blew out the candles, and Bella thought that Rayan loved the boy very much. She couldn't understand at all why he was usually so strict with his son. The girl finally suggested out loud that they try the cake. She put a piece of cake on a saucer for the Duke so that he could try it too. Rayan thought that Bella said that she often makes healthy desserts for Aaron, and it looks really delicious. He speared a piece of cake with his fork and brought it to his mouth. At this point, Evelyn intervened and shouted that the owner should under no circumstances eat this cake because Bella added lye to the dough, and as soon as the Duke ate it, it would corrode everything from his mouth to his esophagus. Everyone was very surprised by this statement, but Bella asked with a smile if Evelyn had any proof. Evelyn said she worked in the kitchen all day and saw everything with her own eyes. Bella asked why Evelyn didn't stop her. Then, if that was the case, it meant she had become an accomplice to the crime. Evelyn replied that at first she didn't understand, but when Bella started cooking, she sensed something was wrong. The dough should be soft and tender, but it suddenly became hot and sticky, and when Evelyn checked, it turned out that there really was lye inside. Bella replied that Evelyn was talking some ridiculous nonsense, as if she wanted to scare everyone so that she could eat the cake alone. With these words, Bella also tried a piece of cake. Evelyn screamed that she was crazy. Why did she eat that? "That's right," Bella said, "because if there was lye in it, she would never have eaten it, but she still ate a piece, and as everyone can see, she was fine." Bella asked Evelyn how it was possible, and it was all because Bella herself noticed something was wrong in advance and waited for the criminal to show himself. If she hadn't added lemon juice when cooking, Bella wouldn't have known there was lye inside. Lemon juice is an acid, and when it comes into contact with an alkali, it causes a reaction that causes bubbles to appear. Unlike normal dough, this one suddenly started bubbling, which seemed strange to Bella. She immediately reported this to the butler and said that someone had mixed a suspicious substance into the dough. After that, they secretly searched the rooms of all the servants, and in Evelyn's room they found the bag used during the crime. As everyone should know, in the duchy they do not use lye for either washing or cleaning. The evidence was there, yet Evelyn seemed about to continue denying it when Alan asked if she had anything to say. But under pressure from Alan, she fell to her knees and feigned remorse. Rayan directly asked Evelyn who ordered her to kill him and Aaron. Evelyn exclaimed that she had not intended to kill anyone at all. She had tried to stop him before he could eat that ill-fated piece of cake. She had done all this because Bella was the same nanny as Evelyn, but everyone was paying attention only to Bella, and simply out of envy, Evelyn wanted to set her up. Rayan noted that this did not change the fact that Evelyn had almost committed murder. Evelyn muttered that it hadn't been about murder, that baking with lye didn't necessarily kill you, that she had admitted she had made a mistake, and now she was begging for forgiveness. Rayan said that today was Aaron's birthday, and he didn't want to ruin his mood, so he told Evelyn to get out of sight and wait for punishment. He told Alan to keep an eye on her, judging by her stupidity and carelessness. It was unlikely that someone else was behind this ridiculous prank. Alan replied that the owner should not worry, he would give her a lecture and transfer Evelyn to menial work. Alan told Evelyn to get up and follow him. Evelyn walked past Bella, who looked at her with a dark gaze and quickly approached. She leaned over Evelyn and asked if it was true that no one had ordered her to do anything. Bella said that rather than waste time on useless envy, it would be better for Evelyn to take care of the young master. Bella felt bad about taking the position of personal nanny that Evelyn had been counting on, but she couldn't forgive her for ruining Aaron's cake. Rayan clearly wanted to take over the case, but Bella still had a bad feeling about it. Rayan turned to the boy and apologized for making him go through this on his birthday. Aaron assured his father that it was okay. He still had a lot of fun today. It was the best party ever. Rayan thanked him for such words and promised to organize an even more grandiose celebration next year. But now it was late. It was time for Aaron to go to bed. Aaron said goodnight to his father and was about to leave, but Rayan stopped him. Or rather, he detained Bella, who was seeing the boy off. The girl asked why he called her, and Rayan wanted to talk to her about the doll that he gave to Aaron and which he clearly liked. Of course, Bella answered, and added that even she could see with what love for the young master this toy was made. "Well done," said the Duke, looking at Bella. The girl did not immediately understand why he used such a word, and then she guessed that this was Rayan saying thank you to her. Apparently he was just shy, so she said that all this was not worth gratitude, and she needed to go to the young master. Smiling at each other, Bella and Aaron headed towards the exit of the room. Rayan watched them go and thought that Aaron had become very attached to Bella, so for his own good, this whole incident could be hushed up quietly if they made a fuss. The servants would become even more jealous of this girl. Meanwhile, Edward returned to the imperial palace, and now the emperor clarified what Rayan had asked. It turned out that he was asking where the collected funds would be sent afterwards. Edward replied that it was not an idle question. The Duke was genuinely interested in it. The emperor then asked Edward if he knew why the fish were huddled together in front of him, and Edward suggested that it was because His Majesty was feeding them. "Do you think so?" the emperor asked again with a smile. "And now?" he asked and lowered his hand without food into the water, and the fish still swam to him. Even without food, they continued to swim up, or rather, it was only necessary to pretend to be kind, and they would immediately gather in anticipation of profit, even if in the end these fools got nothing. Edward also understood this perfectly well. He promised His Majesty to find someone who would help him, pursuing his own benefit, a pawn that could be used and thrown away. The emperor said that after all, the enemy of his enemy, Edward was much better than his pathetic brother. Edward replied that only His Majesty appreciated him at his true worth. Then the emperor said that it was time for Edward's father to come to his senses. Too, he had heard that Edward's brother had also married, it seemed, the daughter of the Marquis of Solan. The lands of Marquis Solan are very vast, and the harvest there is very good. It seems that this time these fools decided to use their brains. The emperor said that God be with him, with everything else. But it was better to learn this because Edward was no longer a boy. It was time for him to start his own family. Edward replied that for him only His Majesty existed. No one dearer than the emperor would ever appear in his life. The emperor said that Edward was still incredibly naive. If he imagined that his brother had married all these women out of great love, the union of families had always been a union of forces. If Edward really wanted to serve the emperor, he must bring a woman who would be useful. Count Gale's sister arrived at the palace today with her brother, and the emperor ordered Edward to go and have a few words with her. Edward tried to object awkwardly. Then the emperor said that if he didn't like Sister Gale, since she was already here anyway, maybe he should have some fun with her himself. Edward bowed and said that he would go himself. The emperor ordered the maid to serve the two tea and dessert. He also ordered her to stay there until the end of their conversation, so that she could later report how much time they spent together. The emperor believed that a dog would never run away if you held it tightly by the leash. At this time, an assistant was reporting to the Duke of Rayan at the estate. He said that he had found out everything. His Majesty was sending Count Gale to the Vinard region, where a strong earthquake had occurred just over a month ago. Rayan said thoughtfully that if the disaster had happened more than a month ago, then by now almost everything should have been restored there, so new collections were suspicious. Count Gale had been a close friend of Duke Rayan's before he had gone to the border, and Owen had offered to contact him to see if he had noticed anything strange, but the Duke believed that now, with it unclear whether Gale was friend or foe, a rash move could ruin everything. It was at this moment that Alan entered and announced that Count Gale and his son had arrived. Rayan thought it was too sudden and the timing too perfect. He told Owen to wait here. A meeting with Gale might give him some clues as to what to do next. Count Gale burst in with a laugh and a declaration that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Then he remembered that Rayan was now the Grand Duke and suggested that he should now address him only by his title and call him His Grace. Rayan shook his hand and said that he could address him as he liked, since this was the first time they had seen each other since he had left for the border. Rayan noticed a boy who looked very much like Gale. It turned out to be the son of the Earl, whom he doted on. The boy's name was Lennon, and the Earl told him to greet the Grand Duke. The boy turned away gloomily, not reacting to his father's words. Rayan said everything was fine and told Alan to introduce Lennon to Aaron. Alan turned to young Mr. Lennon and asked him to come with him so that he could introduce him to his young master. The boy went with him with a haughty expression on his face. In Aaron's room, Bella was helping her charge get dressed. She told the boy that she would leave the milk there to drink later. Aaron was so incredibly sweet, just an angel. I just wanted to hug him and kiss him. And Bella was completely satisfied with the result of her own work. There was a knock at the door, and Alan and another boy entered, whom the butler introduced as Mr. Lennon, the second son of Count Gale, a close friend of His Grace the Grand Duke. "Hello, I'm Aaron," the boy said, approaching the guest, who stood with a gloomy expression on his face. Lennon snorted in displeasure and turned away. Bella watched this behavior with some confusion. Alan told her that he had to serve Count Gale, so he was leaving young Master Lennon in her care. Bella replied that he did not need to worry. She would look after both gentlemen well. The original story only said that Count Gale was one of those who betrayed Rayan and went over to the Emperor's side. The Count clearly came on business. Bella would really like to find a way to eavesdrop on their conversation. Meanwhile, Lennon looked around and snorted dismissively. There was nothing special about the Grand Duke's estate. Lennon was already in such anticipation. In his county, everything was arranged better. There were no decorations anywhere, only junk. Something on the shelf made Lennon smirk. He picked up Aaron's favorite mug and asked if he was still a baby if his mug had a chick on it. It was so childish. Lennon simply took the mug and threw it aside like it was a piece of junk. Bella managed to catch the mug in midair and prevent it from breaking. Her 20 years of experience raising children told her that this child was a completely uncontrollable golden boy of the highest order. Then Lennon opened the book, flipped through a few pages, and declared that it was a story about the war and that there couldn't be anything interesting in it. "Boring," Lennon said, and the book also flew to the side. Bella also managed to catch it. She thought that it was a trifle for her. "You're just shirking your cleaning duties this way now," Lennon said, looking at Bella. The boy angrily began to throw objects around. Bella was quite adept at catching everything Lennon threw. "I thought that was it," the naughty boy exclaimed, and when Bella's hands were busy, he threw a sharp writing pen at her. "Stop it, Lennon! Don't you dare hurt Bella!" Aaron shouted, while Bella caught the pen with her teeth, since she had been dealing with two typical younger brothers since childhood, so this was a piece of cake for her. But when she was struggling to balance with everything she had already caught, the very same jug of milk that she had left for Aaron flew at her head. "Young master, please hold this," she asked Aaron, while Lennon laughed at how ridiculous she looked. Milk flowed down Bella's face, and she tried to persuade herself to be patient, as if in front of her was not a person, but an animal, a cute puppy who loved to play, but whose games were destructive. Aaron stood between them and told Lennon that he couldn't throw milk at people. He told Bella to go change and assured her that he was fine. Lennon rolled his eyes, not understanding how anyone could be so worried about some maid. Bella was surprised to realize that she had just been protected by a 6-year-old child. She told the young gentleman that she was fine. She would quickly change her clothes and bring the children some treats, but the children just needed to play together and not quarrel. "Yeah," Aaron said obediently. He thought that if he could keep those words, Bella would probably be happy, so he turned to Lennon and offered him something to read, and then said that he was currently reading this book. Lennon didn't want to talk about the book. He found the doll that Rayan made, said that it was kind of flimsy, and Aaron didn't have time to stop him before he did something. Aaron rushed towards Lennon, screaming that he could touch anything except her, demanding that he give her the toy back quickly. Lennon laughed and said that the toy was as fragile as Aaron himself and would crumble at one touch. He said that it was indeed worth throwing it on the floor once. "No!" Aaron screamed, seeing the doll that was dear to him fall to the floor and not having time to catch it. The doll fell anyway, and Aaron saw that the toy was broken. Tears welled up in Aaron's eyes, and he exclaimed that his father made the doll and Lennon broke it. Lennon was surprised that the toy was made not by some servant, but by Aaron's father, as if he had nothing better to do since he was making dolls at home. "Not at all," Aaron exclaimed. He tried to explain that his father was always very busy, but he still made him a handmade gift for his birthday. Lennon laughed evilly. He declared that the Duke was not busy with anything. Lennon's father had already told him everything. The Duke had fallen out of favor with His Majesty, after which he was exiled to wander the outskirts, and now he was sitting under surveillance, quiet as a mouse. Aaron shouted at Lennon not to dare insult his father and rushed towards him with his fists. At this time, Rayan and Gale were sitting opposite each other in the living room. Gale said that he and Rayan had grown up together, so he understood perfectly well what kind of person he was, but times had changed, and if you wanted to save your life, it was better not to contradict the will of His Majesty. Rayan wondered if his friend had come to lecture him. Gale replied that this was not a lecture. He was saying all this only because he was worried about Rayana. He suggested that Rayana think about why His Majesty constantly mentions the prophecy about Rayana, where he should act as a savior. The more the Emperor is on guard, the more careful he should be. Rayan replied that when he left here, Gale, like himself, was full of ambition. Rayan could not even imagine that he would turn into a weakling who bowed his head before the power of the Emperor. Gale exclaimed that such a noble man as Rayan simply could not understand his worries, but he too should think about his son, because he could not allow Aaron to grow up without a father. Rayan looked at his interlocutor with a very gloomy look. Bella heard this conversation in raised tones when she went to change her clothes. She realized that they were arguing, that they were talking about the fact that Aaron could grow up without a father. Did the Emperor really already intend to kill Rayan? This could mean that Gale is the same aristocrat who, in the original novel, acted on behalf of the Emperor and raked in a huge amount of money for himself. Rayan, having learned that the Emperor was behind him, made the matter public and finally fell into disfavor, but it was not specifically written who exactly the Emperor used. Perhaps it was Gale. Then this meant that the storyline in which the Emperor kills Rayan had already begun. Bella thought that she had to stop it, but she didn't understand how she could do it, how she could stop it, because she and Rayan were not that close yet. Suddenly, the girl heard screams coming from Aaron's room. The arguing men also heard the cries of their children. Bella didn't understand what had happened, but she couldn't rush off to deal with it right away. She had said she would go change and get something to eat. If she came back like this and empty-handed, she would arouse everyone's suspicions. First, she needed to change quickly. She saw that Rayan and Gale were gone, so the kids should be okay. Gale quickly opened the door to the children's room. From the doorway, he asked if Lennon was okay. Lennon stood in the middle of the chaos and burst into tears. He began to loudly complain to his father that this boy had hit him. Gale began to comfort his son, holding him close. Aaron was silent, only glancing sideways at this scene. Rayan asked Aaron what happened here. Aaron looked away and explained that Lennon was the one who threw his favorite toy on the floor first. Rayan realized that the boy was trying to protect the doll he had given him for his birthday. Gale said indignantly that it happened because of some doll. It broke and broke. There was absolutely no need to bring the matter to a fight over such a trifle. He would simply order the servant to buy a new one for Aaron. Clutching the doll, Aaron tried to explain that his father had made it with his own hands. It was his birthday present, and that you couldn't buy one like it anywhere. Gale cleared his throat and said that in that case there was nothing that could be done. Lennon, of course, did the wrong thing, but Aaron shouldn't have hit him, so it would be best to consider that nothing had happened at all. No, Aaron said, and he said that Lennon had spoken badly about his father, thrown a jug of milk at Bella, and broken things that didn't belong to him. Aaron exclaimed that Lennon should apologize to him, his father, and Bella. Lennon angrily retorted that he was only repeating what he had heard, that he saw nothing special in it, and that he certainly did not understand why he should have to apologize to some maid. "Hey, don't you dare say that!" Aaron shouted. He said that Bella was not some kind of servant, but a person dear to him. At that moment, Bella approached the door with a tray and thought that her heart had never skipped a beat before, even when someone confessed their love to her. Rayan asked her why she left and where she had been all this time. Bella bowed and apologized. She explained that her clothes were wet from the milk spilled on them, so she went away to change. In addition, young Master Aaron's breakfast was thrown onto the floor by young Master Lennon, so she had to prepare a new snack, which is why she was late. Rayan clarified whether this was true. Lennon was unable to answer this direct question immediately. Gale asked his son why he had done such a nasty thing, and then told him to immediately apologize to Aaron. Sorry, Lennon said with a grim expression. Gale said that given the current situation, he and his son should not stay here any longer, so they would go. Wait, said Rayan, and ordered Count Gale to be more careful in the future and not to say nasty things about others in front of the child. The guests left the room, and Rayan and Bella stood and watched them go. Bella turned to Aaron and asked where the young master was. Lennon had abrasions on his face. Maybe Aaron was hurt too. She asked him to take off his clothes so she could examine him. Aaron replied that he was fine, Lennon couldn't hit him. Bella breathed a sigh of relief and said what a joy it was. She said that Aaron was a good man, because if even one scratch appeared on his face, which was a national treasure, it would be a great loss for the entire empire. The Duke looked at them in such a way that Bella even thought she had said something wrong. He told Aaron that hitting people, no matter the reason, was wrong. Yes, father. Aaron nodded obediently, and Bella objected that if he hadn't hit, most likely, all the things there would have been ruined. Rayan said that even if the enemy was at fault, it was wrong to solve the problem with violence. Aaron replied that his father taught him to think carefully about his actions, so he shouldn't have hit Lennon in anger, it was his mistake. And Bella thought that she still couldn't get used to the fact that a 6-year-old child had such a vocabulary. Rayan said that it was enough that Aaron realized his mistake. He ordered him to rewrite the military regulations 10 times and bring them to him as soon as he finished dinner. The boy said that he would hand everything in on time. What a waste of time to rewrite, Bella thought gloomily. She whispered to the boy not to worry, she would help him. Bella, Rayan said, turning around in front of the threshold. He asked her to step outside for a minute, and she suspected that he had heard what she said. Bella left the children's room and followed the Duke. She did not understand why he was still silent. This made her feel somehow uneasy. You, Rayan said, stopping abruptly and turning around so that Bella bumped into him. The girl winced and exclaimed that he had turned around too suddenly. She thought that everything was lost, judging by the expression on Rayan's face. He heard everything. She apologized and said that she would not help the young master with his homework. Rayan looked at Bella with extreme confusion. They stood opposite each other, and the wind from the window blew the girl's hair. Oh, the wind has suddenly started blowing. I need to close the window, Bella thought. What a pleasant aroma, thought Rayan. Freeze, said the Duke, turning his back again. Bella didn't understand what this order to freeze meant. The Duke wanted to say that the window should not be closed. Sitting on the sofa, Rayan said that while he was gone, he would like her to become Aaron's friend. Bella didn't quite understand what he meant. Rayan said that maybe because he was too strict with Aaron, he certainly grew up responsible, and that was good, but he developed a habit of handling everything alone without telling anyone. But Aaron's attitude towards Bella was a little different. It's as if he's talking to a close, trusted friend. Bella thought that this man, it turns out, could be so gentle. She said that now she understood what the gentleman was talking about. Then she asked where the gentleman was going and when he would return, but Rayan replied that it was a personal matter, so there was no point in asking more. His head was aching again from thoughts of his older brother. Bella asked if the master was accidentally planning to leave Aaron in the dark about this, although the young master would probably try to keep it a secret again, but if the Duke suddenly disappeared again, he would be very worried and sad in his heart. Bella stated that even if the Duke couldn't tell her anything, he should definitely tell young Master Aaron before leaving, and she could simply ask Aaron about it later. Rayan said he was going to Vinard for a few days, a disaster area where a pretty strong earthquake happened about a month ago. Bella thought that if this was a disaster area, then her worst guess was correct. It looked like the Duke was coming to check whether the aid money would actually reach the people. Bella asked if she could inquire as to the reason for his lordship's journey to such a distant place, but the Duke replied that she could go. Bella bowed respectfully. She walked down the hallway and thought that Rayan should not follow the original plot under any circumstances. First, Bella had to summarize the contents of the original, which she did in the evening. The Emperor, under the pretext of helping the affected area, allocates funds, then bribes bandits to stage the theft of the transported money. So the Emperor, having seized power, silences everyone under the pretext of an investigation, and Rayan, having learned the truth, accuses the Emperor in front of his vassals. After this, the enraged Emperor completely isolates Rayan politically and sends him back to the border and kills him there. This whole plot now incredibly infuriated Vienna Bella. She did not understand why she wrote it all out like that. Suddenly, a sudden thought struck her. A great idea came to her mind. When morning came, the Duke asked Owen if there had been an answer. Owen reported that Lord Colin, the ruler of Wynard, had given an exact date. He said that in exactly a week they would meet at the estate of Count Gale, and together they would transport the aid supplies. Rayan said that he then needed to go to the palace immediately. He asked if all the funds intended for His Majesty had been checked. Owen said that after checking they were placed in a warehouse so they are safe. Suddenly there were screams. Someone was shouting that a fire had started, that the warehouse had caught fire. Rayan and Owen rushed to the window. They did not understand where the fire had suddenly come from. People were rushing around with buckets, trying to put out the fire. No one understood what it was, how it started to happen. The Duke asked Alan if there were any casualties. The butler replied that, fortunately, there were none, and the fire was almost completely extinguished. Rayan ordered that the fire be quickly extinguished completely and the premises inspected. He himself entered the warehouse, making sure that it was mostly smoke. Almost everything inside was intact, and the humanitarian aid was also in order, but something was still not right. Rayan's attention was drawn to a white sheet of paper. He took the note and read what was there. Rayan had seen this handwriting somewhere before, but he couldn't immediately remember where. Later, in his office, Owen reported that the results of the investigation into this fire showed that the initial source of the fire was a haystack at the entrance to the warehouse, and then the fire spread to the wooden gates of the warehouse and quickly spread. Nothing suspicious was found on the warehouse guards or people entering and leaving it. Rayan clarified what exactly the guards said. Owen replied that Bella had gone into the pantry once, but other than her persistent attempt to feed everyone her ugly cookies, there had been nothing suspicious about her behavior, and they also said that her clothes were quite expensive. Rayan realized that Bella had come after all, and he just caught himself thinking that he had seen this handwriting somewhere before. Now he realized that it belonged to Bella. The fire started shortly after Bella left the warehouse. About 15 minutes after the fire started, Bella also ran to put it out. Rayan thought that she had started the fire on purpose because she was not allowed to enter the warehouse. If the fire started 15 minutes after she left, then it becomes perfectly clear what exactly happened. Bella added a flammable substance to the cookies, making them look like they should never be eaten, after which she offered them to the security guards on duty at the warehouse. As expected, they immediately refused because of the clearly strange smell and appearance. In the end, Bella left the cookies, telling them to eat them later, and hid nearby and, throwing a match on the cookies, set the warehouse on fire. And then, pretending to help put out the fire, she, as planned, left a note in a prominent place. Owen asked why his lordship had such an expression on his face. Rayan said that nothing like that was going on, and then asked how the investigation into Bella that he had ordered earlier was going. He wanted to know if they had found anything suspicious. Owen replied that they had not been able to find out anything yet. They went to where Bella lived and met with her relatives and neighbors. Most of their information coincides with the information received from Bella herself, but the only strange thing is that her husband and child left the village where they went, which is still being clarified. "I see," Rayan said, thinking that arson was bad and that she should be properly punished for it. But after reading the note, he no longer felt like punishing her. The note stated that all the funds raised for aid would be taken away by bandits bought by the emperors. Rayan couldn't understand how Bella could have learned about the aid funds raised by the nobility. Even if she had received some information, she definitely couldn't have known about his brother's plan. He assumed that the girl was trying to tell him this, even by starting a fire, because she knew that the Duke was investigating this matter, so first of all he needed to meet Bella and talk. He asked Owen where Bella was now. The assistant replied that she was probably watching the training of young Master Aaron now. He could have called her here now. Rayan said that he would go there himself and see Aaron at the same time. Owen wondered if his lordship suspected Bella, although if he did, he would have her arrested immediately, and it was very strange that he himself was going to go to her. The training was in full swing. Aaron was successfully parrying blows and delivering some pretty strong ones himself. He had trained so hard. Bella stood nearby and watched, when suddenly she felt a strong urge to sneeze. She sneezed and almost dropped the tray. Bella thought that although it was still summer, suddenly goosebumps ran across her skin. Probably someone was talking about her now. Suddenly she saw someone's shadow appear on the path in front of her. It seemed like someone was standing behind her, and Bella turned around to see who it was. It was the Duke. The Duke showed the girl the note and asked if she had written it. Bella feigned bewilderment and asked what he was talking about. She didn't understand how he could know. Could he really recognize her handwriting? Ah, right, she remembered, because a few days ago she helped Aaron rewrite the military regulations. Bella looked at the teapot and thought that if the paper got wet, the handwriting would be impossible to read. And then she can just deny everything. "Sir, it's hot outside, drink some water," she said, and began pouring water from the kettle into a glass. Rayan said he was fine, but the girl had already stepped towards him with a tray. At that moment, Bella tripped over a stone. The girl screamed and began to fall, dropping her tray with everything on it. During the fall, Bella knocked down the Duke, grabbing onto him. They fell onto the path next to the training ground where Aaron and his mentor were training. Bella began to ask for forgiveness because she only wanted to pour water on the paper, but as a result she brought the Duke himself down to the ground, and now she did not understand what to do. The Duke placed his hand on Bella's forehead. The girl didn't understand why Rayan was pressing on her forehead. The Duke asked how long she intended to lie on him. Bella apologized again and quickly jumped to her feet. She handed him a handkerchief and apologized for suddenly losing her balance. Rayan assumed that the girl did it on purpose. "No," Bella shook her head desperately. Rayan looked at her sternly and said that after dinner he was going to go to the palace. When he returned in the evening, he would have questions for her, so she should think carefully about how she would answer them. He left and Bella exhaled. It was a blessing that he wasn't too angry. Rayan didn't go far. He stopped in deep thought. At the appointed time, the Duke arrived at the Emperor's palace. He reported that he had brought funds and supplies for aid that would be sent to the Vinard region, and now he asked His Majesty to first inspect them and decide whether they were sufficient. His Majesty ordered Edward to go and check what had been brought. Edward looked into one of the chests and reported to His Majesty that the Grand Duke had shown great zeal this time. Rayan said that he was only doing his duty as a subject. Edward checked the chests. The Emperor watched from his throne. Finally, Edward closed the lids back, satisfied with his inspection. He bowed to His Majesty and said that the Grand Duke's zeal would be of great help to the victims. The Emperor agreed that Rayan's concern for the people was not inferior to his own. Then he asked why the Duke had brought relief funds here. If he wanted to transport these funds, his army could take care of it. "No, Your Majesty," Rayan replied, "because a few days ago he received news of rebels in the northwestern region, so he sent some of his soldiers to suppress the rebellion, and there were few troops left in the capital. He asked for forgiveness, but he was afraid that he would not be able to deal with the transportation of aid supplies." The Emperor exclaimed that he was hearing about this for the first time, and asked why the Duke had not reported to him about the movement of the troops. Rayan explained that he had assumed that His Majesty had already been informed of everything, and since it was a small-scale rebellion and the Emperor had not expressed much concern, Rayan had assumed that he had secretly entrusted the suppression to him and had acted accordingly. The Emperor agreed that he had been very busy lately, but since the Duke had few soldiers, he would entrust the transportation of funds to help Gale. Rayan said that if he had no more assignments, he asked permission to take his leave. When he was about to leave, he heard someone call out to him. He turned around and, seeing Edward, asked what had happened. The Emperor's assistant said that although the Duke had been unable to take on the task of transporting the relief supplies, his face did not seem to express much regret. Rayan asked why he should regret it. Edward recalled that when he visited the Duke's residence last time, Rayan asked him exactly which region all this money would be sent to. It was then that Edward realized that his lordship was sure that all this enormous money would not reach the affected region safely. Rayan explained that he asked this only out of pure curiosity. He asked not to be portrayed as such an unfaithful subject. At this point, the Duke asked permission to take his leave and, turning around, walked away, leaving Edward to ponder whether Rayan really did not understand His Majesty's true intentions. After all, it was Edward who had deliberately provoked a rebellion in the northwestern region in order to mobilize Rayan's troops and prevent them from interfering with the transportation of aid funds, in which, no doubt, they succeeded, but it was unclear why he had such an indifferent expression on his face then. It seems the time has come to put the spy into action. Night fell, and in that night the doubts that had plagued Bella only became more painful. The girl wandered from corner to corner, trying to figure out what to do and how to proceed. She suffered and thought that it was in vain that she helped Aaron with his punishment. Suddenly she saw that his lordship had arrived at the estate. Bella thought that this wouldn't do. Since she was already caught anyway, she might as well admit what she had to. And as for the rest, she would try to get out of it by inventing something. The Duke's footsteps sounded closer and closer. Rayan was rapidly approaching. He asked Bella if she had thought it all through. Bella bowed and said that she would tell his lordship everything honestly, and the Duke replied that this was a good decision. The Duke told her to go with him to his office and talk there. "Sir," Bella told him when they arrived, and admitted that it was she who set the warehouse on fire and left the note, so she was ready to accept any punishment. Rayan said that he could see that Bella had decided to confess, knowing that she couldn't deceive him. It seemed that the girl wasn't as stupid as he had initially assumed, but now he still wanted to know what her goal was. Bella said she thought this method would be more effective in getting it into the Duke's head than if she said it directly, so she set the warehouse on fire and, in the confusion, took advantage of the moment to leave a note and leave. The Duke asked gloomily how an ordinary nanny could know what he was going to do. Bella replied that she had a friend from her hometown who was excellent at collecting information. As soon as she heard everything, she immediately thought that she must definitely tell the gentleman about it. However, as his lordship had just said, she thought that he would not believe the words of an ordinary nanny, so she was forced to resort to another method. She did this so that Rayan would not quarrel with his brother, and the aid funds would be delivered without being intercepted, but the Duke did not understand this. He asked what to do now, if in fact he was also on the side of the Emperor. "Sir," Bella exclaimed, and asked if he really thought that she would believe his words, because she knew how much the Lord cherished the country and loved the people and the people around him, and she liked such a lord. That's why she tried to help the Duke. Rayan tried to process what she had just said. They stood frozen for a moment, looking at each other. "Oh, what am I even talking about?" Bella thought. She hastened to explain that she meant that she liked him not in the sense that happens between a man and a woman, although they are a man and a woman, and the more she spoke, the stranger it all sounded. Rayan said that was it, that was enough. He understood what Bella meant, so it was time to stop. Bella said that perhaps everyone thought that the Duke, like everyone else, did not care whether the aid reached the distressed region. But Bella thought that if the master learned the truth later, he would be deeply saddened, and if after that he also quarreled with His Majesty and lost his favor, the situation could become irrevocably worse and even put the master's life in danger. She was too scared to think about what would happen to young Master Aaron. "Aaron," the Duke asked again. Bella said that after losing his father, the boy could turn into a war monster to avenge him. This train of thought surprised the Duke. Bella said that they understood that the master absolutely wanted to protect the aid funds, so she suggested that he replace the box with money with a box with stones. If the Duke could switch it right before sending it, then they would not have to open it and check the contents. Rayan agreed that he had just thought about something like that, but then he wanted to ask the girl one last question. No evidence was found at the scene, as if the haystacks had caught fire on their own. The Duke wanted to know how Bella did it. Bella thought darkly that she had intended to use this again later, but since everything was out in the open, she thought it might as well be told. When milk is boiled at high temperatures, a substance called calcium phosphate settles at the bottom. If this calcium phosphate is mixed with carbon powder and quartz sand and heated, phosphorus is formed. Having explained all this, Bella stared at the Duke. She waited for him to react somehow. Due to the fact that there was no reaction, she was already feeling awkward. Phosphorus powder has a low ignition temperature, so in hot summer, if you simply sprinkle it on dry hay, it will quickly ignite under the influence of sunlight. It was a great way to start a fire without even being at the scene. The Duke noted that Bella acted much more professionally than he could have imagined, and he had never heard of such a method before. Bella thought with a smile that in another life she was simply going to write her next work in the genre of forensics. In any case, it seemed that the Duke believed her words, and the thought of this brought relief. Rayan said there was something he still didn't understand. Bella's personal information indicated that she had never been taught to read and write, so it was unclear how she knew not only how to write, but also such complex scientific information. "Right, I completely forgot about that," Bella thought. "Well, actually," the girl muttered, trying to think of a quick lie to tell. Like many commoners, Bella explained, she had a difficult family situation, so she couldn't go to school, but she was very interested in science, so she secretly attended her younger brother's classes, where she was able to gain the necessary knowledge. Fearing that her parents would find out, she constantly pretended that she couldn't read. Apparently, the teacher found her worthy of praise, which is why he later taught her a lot of different additional knowledge. "That's how it is," the Duke said skeptically, crossing his arms over his chest. Bella explained that, in fact, the method she used was already widely used in everyday life. Acrobats and street jesters often used phosphorus powder to attract people's attention. Bella suggested that perhaps the gentleman had not seen anything like this before because he had been on the border for a long time. Rayan couldn't tell how much truth and how much lies were in Bella's words, and ultimately the girl's actions did not harm him, so he said that he was willing to accept that her words were true. Bella asked what it meant to say they were truthful, and was told that even though it was done with good intentions, arson was still a clear crime, and Bella had to be punished. Rayan told her to stay in her room and be under house arrest for 3 days, and someone else would be assigned to take care of Aaron for those 3 days. While she was under arrest, Rayan told her to try to make the phosphorus powder she had spoken of. Bella beamed and guessed that his lordship must be worried that she would get bored. Rayan replied that Bella should not be mistaken. He was ordering her to do this because it could be useful for their plan, so it had to be done without further ado, and Owen would bring her the ingredients she needed. "Okay, I understand," Bella replied. Rayan said that she could go, he was already tired. With a joyful smile, the girl walked away, thank God. She was not kicked out of this house and everything turned out well. When Rayan suddenly stopped her, Bella was indignant in her soul, but out loud with a smile she asked if his lordship would like to entrust her with anything else. He reminded her of their encounter that afternoon, and asked if she was in any pain. "What?" Bella asked again, puzzled. "Nothing," answered Rayan. "Okay, go." He waved his hand, but at that moment Bella remembered something. "Oh yes," she said, taking a few steps. She tried to remember when and who she had bumped into today. Was the Duke talking about that very incident when she knocked him to the ground? But then he himself began to push her so that she would get up faster. Oh, did Rayan catch her on purpose because he was afraid it would hurt if she hit herself? Late at night, Bella could not fall asleep. She felt very hungry. Bella was sitting on the floor next to her bed, with 3 jars standing next to her. It was the middle of the night now. Bella thought that no one would know if she stole some food from the kitchen. Peering cautiously out of the room, the girl scolded Owen, who, out of greed, brought her too little food because so much energy was spent on physical labor. Bella went to the window. The moonlight was so impossibly bright today, and suddenly she noticed that something was happening in the garden. She saw a figure creeping through the garden and recognized it as Evelyn. Evelyn suddenly stopped and told someone to get out, as there was no one there. "I'm here," the man in the hooded cloak that hid his face answered her. "Why did you suddenly ask for a meeting?" Evelyn asked him in a displeased tone. The stranger handed her a small bag and said that his master had told him to give this to her. Evelyn was delighted and said that finally the master was giving her a chance. With this, she would be able to get rid of that annoying girl, Bella. The stranger said that the master had told her not to do anything stupid and to wait quietly. He was extremely displeased to learn that Evelyn had been fired from her position as a nanny for doing such an obvious stupidity. He reminded her that the master was a ruthless and cold-blooded man. The moment the plan went wrong, he could order her to be killed. Evelyn replied that she also had her own plans and asked the stranger to convey her words exactly to the gentleman. She said that the gentleman should immediately prepare payment for the elimination of Rayan. Unfortunately, Bella, hiding behind the tree, could hardly hear anything. She was about to come closer when someone very close asked what she was doing there. Bella turned around sharply to see who was there. It was young Master Aaron, who asked if she was under house arrest. He wanted to know what she was doing here. Bella thought that it was good that she hadn't been caught. Eavesdropping probably wouldn't work. She needed to quickly take Aaron to his room. She put her finger to her lips, took the boy by the hand, and told him to follow her quietly. When they stepped aside, Bella asked the boy why he had left the house at such a late hour, and also where the maid who served the young master had gone. Aaron replied that he went out to go to the toilet alone because he didn't want to wake up the fast-sleeping maid. He couldn't even imagine that he would be able to see Bella. He rushed to hug the girl. "Bella, I missed you," Aaron said, clinging to his nanny. They hadn't seen each other for only 2 days, but he already missed her terribly. Bella replied that she also missed the young master. She stroked the boy's head. "True?" Aaron asked again with delight and looked at Bella with shining eyes. Bella said that while she was locked up, she was wondering if the young master was eating well, if the teacher was scolding him, if he had a pleasant day, and she also sternly reminded him that according to the rules, the young master must be accompanied by a maid in the evenings, so next time he should not wander around alone. If some bad person captures the young master, how will Bella and the Duke feel? Aaron replied that he understood everything and would not wander alone anymore. Bella said that then let what happened today remain their personal secret. Aaron replied that since they had agreed, he would not tell anyone anything. They made a pact, holding each other's little fingers. Bella said that now they would go back. She took the boy by the hand and they walked along the path to the house. Bella thought she didn't know what exactly Evelyn was planning, but it looked like it wouldn't end well. She needed to get rid of her before she did anything stupid. Meanwhile, at Count Gale's residence, Hector, captain of Count Gale's guard, gave his guard the order to begin preparations, because they would soon be leaving for the imperial palace. Count Gale asked if Hector had checked everything and not forgotten anything. Hector promised to check everything again just in case. He would make sure that they could set out while the count was at the banquet. Gale said that this was good, but there was no need for unnecessary haste. So as not to lose the box, it had to be transported with care, extremely carefully, because Gale was counting on Hector for this matter. The captain of the guard bowed and said that he understood everything. "Brother, so you were here?" A loud voice rang out, and Daisy Gale, Count Gale's younger sister, who had been looking for her brother for a long time, approached them. Gale told Daisy to come over to them, and Hector blushed and said hello to her. The girl asked why her brother had hidden in such a secluded place, so she had to search him. He seemed to have forgotten that they had to go to the palace today. Gale said there was still plenty of time before they had to leave, but Daisy explained that there was someone she really wanted to please, so her brother had to help her choose a dress. Gale asked if Daisy was trying to impress His Majesty the Emperor. Daisy flushed and said that her brother knew everything, but for some reason he was making fun of her. She asked him to stop dragging his feet, and showed him pictures of dresses from which he had to choose one, pink or pale yellow. Gale replied that he had no business understanding such things, especially since it was not he who should like the dress. But Daisy screamed that her brother was always teasing her. "Wear pink," she suddenly heard. Hector bowed and said that pink was the color that suited my lady best. Daisy smiled and said that Hector, as expected, knew her very well, so she would wear the pink dress on his advice. The girl started running, and Gale shouted after her that he asked her not to run. Gale told Hector that he was leaving everything else to him, and the captain of the guard wished him safe travels. He did not understand why such a sweet girl as Milady was being proposed to Edward. The full moon shone brightly in the sky above the imperial palace. The emperor told Gale that he had done a great job in helping the victims. Therefore, the emperor specially arranged this meeting to praise him in advance. Gale said it wasn't necessary, he was just doing his duty. The emperor told him to sit down quickly in private. It was not necessary to observe such formalities. The emperor called Edward, who had been standing behind his chair all this time, and told him to sit down to eat together. Edward gave him good advice, so it could be said that he also made his contribution. Edward said he would obey, and then the emperor told him to sit next to Daisy. The emperor ordered Gale to sit on his left-hand side so that Edward could sit next to Daisy, which would make it easier for Edward to court the girl, since a gentleman is obliged to take care of a young lady. For some reason, Edward hesitated and tried to say something. The emperor looked at him intently and asked if he was refusing. But Edward was ready to obey His Majesty's command. The emperor laughed and said that it was the right choice. Everyone took their places according to the imperial command. Daisy turned happily to Edward and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The girl said that she had heard that Sir Edward was an excellent horseman. She had long wanted to learn and asked him to teach her sometime. Edward replied that since Lady Daisy was so eager to learn, he would be happy to teach her, but according to the laws of this country, women were required to learn horse riding from female instructors. And since Edward was a man, it would be difficult for him to teach a lady. Instead, he may recommend a capable female mentor to her. "Thank you," Daisy replied politely, but she couldn't hide the disappointment on her face. Then Edward said that if my lady was still scared, she could come to him and he would stay by her side. Daisy was delighted and said that in that case she would count on him. The emperor looked at them and then remarked to Gale that his sister and Edward did indeed look beautiful together. The count replied that all this was thanks to the care of His Majesty. Then the emperor asked how the work he had entrusted to Gale was progressing. The count reported that everything was going smoothly, without any hitches, so His Majesty could rest easy. The emperor said that it was very good. He was very calm that Gale and Edward were working for him. At this time, the convoy with money was already on its way. In the camp where the accompanying party was resting, fires were burning brightly. One of the men standing guard greeted the returning Mr. Hector. He said that the load turned out to be heavier than they expected. The soldiers were exhausted. They needed to be changed. Hector said that they needed to go with him to the barracks, select the strong guys, and assign other people to replace them. The butler prepared hot food after learning that people were working in such cold weather, and the rest could go eat, warm up, and await further instructions. Hector asked if everyone understood everything, and then ordered them to do it. "Then let's go," sounded after this, and they headed towards the erected tent. There were barrels and chests nearby, and a fire was lit in special burners. There was also a fire in the fireplace in the house to make it warmer. "Edward," said His Majesty, raising his glass of wine. "Yes, Your Majesty," Edward responded, rising from his seat at the table. The Emperor said it was late and asked Edward to take Daisy home because he had something else to discuss with Gale. Daisy bowed and said that then, with His Majesty's permission, she would leave. She thanked Edward for his attention, to which he replied that it was not worth thanking. Already in the carriage, Daisy asked Edward if he liked her dress today. He replied that her dress today suited her very well. The girl blushed and thought that this dress had been made to order especially for today, so that Daisy would meet Sir Edward in it. Edward said it was a great honor for him to accompany the young lady today. The girl said that she was curious about something she would like to know if her current companion believed in love predetermined by fate. "Love predetermined by fate," Edward said, confused and thoughtful. The face of the stranger he had met on the evening street immediately appeared before his mind's eye. This is who these words of the unsuspecting Daisy sounded about for him. Edward said out loud that he didn't believe there was such a thing as destined love, and Daisy asked what kind of love he believed in then. Edward said that all his thoughts were only about serving His Majesty, and he never thought about a relationship with a woman beyond that. Daisy reminded him that Sir Edward would eventually need to marry and start a family, so she wanted to be there if that day came. Edward didn't elaborate further. He said that the carriage had arrived at its destination, and Daisy could only fall silent sadly. The carriage stopped at the porch of the Count's mansion. Edward got out of the carriage first. Daisy remained inside with a dejected look. He extended his hand and invited Lady Daisy to come out too. "Thank you," said the blushing girl, touching his palm. "Madam, trouble." Suddenly a loud cry reached them. A servant running up shouted that there was a fire in the kitchen. "What?" Edward and Daisy exclaimed, completely stunned. People were shouting that more water was needed, that there weren't enough buckets, that they needed to throw earth on the fire, whatever. Daisy asked what was going on here, how this fire started, and where it happened. The butler replied that it all started in the kitchen. In the last few days they had been drying hay and firewood there, and it seemed that this had caused the fire to flare up even more strongly, and it had already spread to the hall. Edward asked if it was only the kitchen and the great hall that were on fire, and if the fire had spread anywhere else. They told him that everything was fine in other places, but because the fire broke out suddenly and it was dark outside, it was very difficult to put it out. It was good that the fire did not reach the warehouse. Edward asked if Count Gale had already been informed of the incident, and the butler replied that he had sent a man to the palace some time ago, but it was unknown when the master would return. Edward realized that the fire had not affected the warehouse where the chests were kept, so there was no need to disturb His Majesty. He would only be angry that his mood would be spoiled over a trifle. So Edward said out loud that Count Gale was currently drinking with His Majesty and that there was no point in disturbing them. He ordered that the servant who had gone to the Count be caught up with and that he be brought back immediately because he would sort things out himself. His order was obeyed. Edward himself took charge of extinguishing the fire. He did not know that he was being watched from the side. The man who was in the bushes commanded his men to begin. Strong workers began to drag the chests. A bright light was burning in the windows of the mansion. "Fire!" exclaimed Count Gale, running up. He did not understand why nothing had been reported to him about what had happened. He was told that the butler had tried to inform him, but as the Earl was drinking with His Majesty, the lady and Sir Edward had ordered the messenger to return. Gale replied that even in this case, he should have been informed about such an important matter. There was a fire in the house, but they were hiding it from him, and even if they were afraid of spoiling His Majesty's mood, this decision was arbitrary and insolent. Gale ordered that the exact cause of the fire be found out, and that he be informed when he returned. "Count Gale, I hope I'm not late," said the man who suddenly appeared accompanied by soldiers. It was the Lord of the Vineyard region, Philip Collin. He said that he had not seen Gale for a long time. Almost 10 years had passed, but Gale had not changed at all since then. Gale hastened to assure Count Collin that, having heard that he needed help, he had immediately volunteered, and since the Count had arrived here, they could leave right away. Gale ordered his men to load the chests into the wagons. He himself turned to the Count and said that then they could go. Gale thought that stupid Count Collin had come to ask for money because of the earthquake that had happened a whole month ago, because when today's bandits took everything away, Collin would have to solve the problems by allocating funds from his own pocket. Soon the carriage with the chests was rolling along the forest road. Count Colin was delighted. He had not known before that His Majesty cared so much about the victims. It was truly amazing that he had prepared so many resources to help them. Gale told him that the Count was right. He was also very surprised. Gale did not understand why Colin did not have a drop of doubt regarding His Majesty's intentions, as if the Count was naive or simply stupid. Count Colin said that he served the third emperor. The two previous rulers had truly loved their people, but the current emperor turned out to be different. Then he added that it was just happiness that he had changed. They were driving along a forest road when they suddenly stopped, and Count Colin asked what had happened. Bandits were approaching them. There were more than 20 of them, and all were armed. Everything was going according to plan, Gale realized to himself, and then feigned extreme surprise. He exclaimed that he would try to distract them with one chest, and ordered Count Colin to take the rest and leave as quickly as possible. But Colin objected that he could not do that and leave. He would stay to protect all the chests. And then an armed gang of robbers appeared within sight, blocking the road. Colin noted that they were surrounded both from the front and from behind. Nothing could be done, but at least they could stretch their legs a little after a long break. Gale didn't like this. Why the hell did this old man take out a sword without a need? He should have thought about his age. His actions would only provoke the bandits. "Boys, today we will have peace," declared their leader. Gale exclaimed that here was everything they wanted, if only their lives were spared, and he handed them one of the chests. The leader said that he would first check if this was enough for them. Then the robber knocked down the lock and threw back the lid of the chest. He cursed and saw that there were only solid stones there, and yet they had been told that they would be allowed to take a handful of what was inside, so it turned out that they had been deceived. "It's a trap. Kill them all," it sounded immediately. Cries for help were heard everywhere. People were falling dead. Count Colin shouted to Gale to guard the aid money for the victims. The people of Vinard were waiting for it, and they were obliged to deliver it safe and sound. "Sir Colin, wait!" Gale shouted, trying to get through to him. "Stop. What are you doing?" Gale tried to stop the bandits, explaining that this wasn't real. They were supposed to be pretending. Gale looked with horror at what was now happening. Count Colin fell to his knees before the man with the naked, bloody sword. Gale tried to stop the hired killer before the decisive blow. Gale couldn't allow this to happen, and then he dismounted quickly. He rushed between the combatants, covering Count Colin. He made it in time, and only blood flew from the lightning strike. Gale asked the Count if he was okay. Colin asked him not to think about him, but to take the money and leave here as quickly as possible. Gale couldn't understand why there was a real massacre here instead of a performance. Could it be that Edward had betrayed them? Attack! Take them alive at any cost. Screams were heard everywhere. Gale heard a rider approaching and hoped it was Edward. It could only be him. But at the head of the approaching detachment was a completely different person. It was a completely unexpected character for this scene, Grand Duke Ryan Winthrop. The Duke rushed at the bandits, his men supported him, and the fight raged with renewed vigor. Quite quickly, the bandits decided to retreat and disappeared from sight. He didn't think that the bribed bandits would actually attack. It was good that he was watching what was happening from afar. Rayan rushed to Sir Colin to see if he was okay. He shouted to Owen to take Sir Colin to the doctor quickly. Gale asked how Rayan knew to come here. Rayan replied that His Majesty had instructed him to transport supplies, but he had ultimately failed, and this had been bothering him, so that as soon as the rebellion was suppressed, he had rushed to help, not understanding how this had happened. Rayan expressed the opinion that they had been too careless in protecting themselves from bandits, since there was no guarantee that there was only one gang operating here. There were too many wounded and dead who would have been better off receiving treatment in Vinard, so they should have gone with the detachment of soldiers. "No need," Gale responded gloomily to this proposal. "Then do as you please," said Rayan. He ordered the soldiers to take the captured workers to the capital and then jumped on his horse. After everything was settled, the detachment set off. Gale remained sitting on the road. He looked at his blood-stained hands and did not understand what he should now report to His Majesty. One of his men asked him what he would do now. Everyone was waiting for his orders. According to the original plan, they were supposed to return from here to the Imperial Palace, and Count Colin would return to Vinard empty-handed and simply report that the bandits had stolen the aid fund money. Edward said he would sort everything out himself, but now it was unclear what he himself had done. He insisted that the bandits would only pretend to attack, but they had taken the chests and attacked for real. There was nothing that could be done about it. First, he would have to go to Vinard and report the theft instead of Colin. Gale ordered to continue on the way. Thus, the convoy reached the populated lands of Vinard. People, exhausted and emaciated from hunger, stood along the road. They watched the arriving strangers with sad, empty gazes. The man in uniform bowed to Count Gale and introduced himself as Count Colin's second son, Solid Vinard. Gale asked the man if he wasn't wearing a sheriff's uniform. He replied that this was all true, and in order to at least help the residents suffering from disasters and maintain order, he volunteered to act as chief of the guard for several months. Gale chuckled and noted that his interlocutor was a rather strange man, an aristocrat himself, and yet he was engaged in such an unworthy business. Gale said that there were many wounded here, so first it was worth calling the healers, but more importantly, he had to explain something about the means of assistance. But Solid Vinard did not let him finish, assuming that he wanted to talk about the means that had been sent in advance by a man. Gale didn't quite understand what the other man meant, but Solid Vinard replied that if it was about aid, they had received it safely, and then offered to check everything. Gale walked over to one of the chests and grabbed the lid. When he threw it back, he saw that it was filled to the brim with gold coins. Gale didn't understand how this happened, why the money that the bandits were supposed to take and send to the palace was here. This is what was happening in the imperial palace. The emperor stood in front of the chests with a gloomy face. He told Edward to find out what exactly happened. The fact is that instead of gold coins, the chests turned out to be filled with the most ordinary cobblestones. Thanks to the aid funds, stability has been restored in the Vinard region, and the robbers who attacked Gale and Colin's squad were thrown into prison. The emperor was seething with anger at the failed plan, but outwardly expressed joy and praised Rayan for destroying the bandit gang. And the next day, those robbers who were captured alive were hanged without any interrogation, so neither Edward nor Gale, who came to call them to account, nor anyone else was able to find out the reason for the complete failure of this plan. At this time, at the estate of the Grand Duke of Winthrop, Bella made dough for another batch of cookies with an inspired expression on her face. Evelyn entered the kitchen and loudly asked Bella what she was doing. Bella replied that she was preparing snacks for young Master Aaron so that he could have a snack after class. Evelyn came closer and asked for forgiveness for that incident. She wanted to forget about it forever. Bella asked why she was telling her this if it was more important that Evelyn was forgiven by the master. Evelyn explained that it was a well-known fact that in this house Bella occupied the highest position after the butler, so now she asked him to put in a good word for her with Alan. Evelyn came here to work as a nanny, and she continues to do the work of a servant. It was somehow wrong, and she was no longer very old enough for this. Bella thought that since Evelyn suddenly started talking like that, it meant she was going to slowly start her plan. That was good. This time Bella would definitely find out what Evelyn was up to. Bella said she would talk to the butler about it. "Thank you," Evelyn said, bowing to her. Bella said she was the one to thank. Young Master Aaron was having a lesson. The teacher said that in a locked room there were 3 cats, yellow and 2 gray. If one cat escaped through the window, it was necessary to calculate the probability that this escaped cat would be yellow. Aaron replied that it was 60%. The teacher said that this was correct, and then suggested moving on to the next page. Then Irene said that the probability could be 0% or 100. Rayan walked down the hallway and became interested in what was coming from the classroom. Then Aaron said that the probability could be 20% or even 10. The teacher asked what the young master meant. She wanted Aaron to explain his thought. The boy replied that the door was not locked, so they could not know whether the cat had come out or not until they opened the door and checked. They could not know whether the cat had escaped or how many had escaped. The teacher simply didn't understand what kind of nonsense this was. Irvin replied that it was a thought experiment conducted by a scientist named Schrödinger. Until you open the door, it is impossible to confirm whether there is a cat there or not. The teacher asked where he heard that. Aaron replied that Bella told him, and he thinks it sounds very interesting. Bella saw Rayan eavesdropping at the study room door and asked why he wasn't coming in. He looked at her intently and asked what she was teaching Aaron anyway. Bella replied that she had simply told him a few scientific facts in the form of stories, and that she did not understand what had happened or why Rayan had such a reaction. Rayan wanted to know what kind of Schrödinger's cat this was. Bella explained that this was the lesson, not to jump to conclusions about something you're not sure of until it's confirmed. Aaron said that especially a ruler who leads the people should be doubly careful in his words. Bella thought indignantly that she hadn't said anything like that, and the Duke realized with satisfaction what it all meant. Rayan extended his hand to the girl and said that she had played a great role in this interesting incident, so the Duke would reward her and wanted to know what she wanted. He asked Bella to clarify what exactly she wanted, money or perhaps a vacation. Bella thought that she really wanted Rayan to survive safely, but she didn't know if such a wish would come true if she said it out loud. So she said that she had never thought about it, and besides, her wish was not something that anyone else could fulfill. She asked permission to tell her later if she thought of something else. "Okay," said Rayan, "then that's what we'll do." Bella said that she would go then and asked her to excuse her, but Rayan stopped her. Bella asked if his lordship had any other orders for her. Rayan replied that he would fulfill one more small wish of hers that she wanted to fulfill right now, and told her to speak. Bella thought about what little wish she had right now, and realized that she actually had one. The girl heard that there was a place behind the estate, beautiful, like something out of a fairy tale. She would like to visit there. "That's how it is," Rayan said with a smile, and told Bella to get ready, and they would go as soon as possible. Bella asked in amazement, was it really going to happen right now? Soon she came to a large gate. Bella thought she had gone out as she had been told, but she felt a bit awkward, and she hadn't worn regular clothes for a long time. "You've been waiting for a long time," Rayan's voice rang out. The Duke approached Bella, leading the horse by the bridle. He said that they could go, and the girl noticed that there was only one horse. Rayan asked Bella if she could ride a horse, and she admitted that she couldn't. Rayan said that was why he had only prepared one horse, and then climbed into the saddle. Then he extended his hand to Bella. Come on," he said to the girl, frozen in indecision. He wanted Bella to take his hand so that she could then sit him next to her on the horse. "Why are you hesitating?" Rayan asked again. He grabbed the girl by the waist and pulled her towards him. Bella's feet left the ground and she found herself in Rayan's arms. "Hold on tight," Rayan said as he lifted her onto the horse. Bella thought with horror that she had nothing to hold on to, unless it was the Duke himself. The gates opened and the Duke directed his horse along the road. Soon they arrived at a meadow surrounded by low green hills. It was an incredible place with just so many flowers blooming. So this is what a vacation is, Bella thought happily. In her past life, she thought that everyone had gone on vacation, and she, a freelancer, had to work, and this seemed completely unfair because she was not even paid a salary commensurate with all the efforts expended. Bella remembered many such days and nights when, out of joy, only a photograph remained on the table. And after the main work, I still had to finish the manuscript. I had to quickly finish the remaining 9 slides of the presentation and run home. Then she was so envious of those who went on vacation, but now she can feel the wind and look at the clouds. She never thought before that the world in her novel was so beautiful. She was so happy that she wanted time to stop right now. Rayan glanced sideways at the girl and noted that she looked very pleased. The horse stumbled and made a sudden movement to keep up the pace of the race. Rayan managed to stay in the saddle and stop the horse. Bella had to cling to the Duke's waist to keep from falling. Rayan glanced sideways at the girl. Bella closed her eyes and pressed herself against him, and he asked if she was scared. Bella thought her heart would stop. The whole story didn't end with a tragic fall from a horse. The girl found the strength to laugh nervously and say that she wasn't scared at all. Then the horse moved again, and Bella clung to the Duke again. The next moment she pulled away abruptly and asked for forgiveness, exclaiming that she had not grabbed him on purpose. "It's okay, I forgive you," said Rayan. He turned around and said that Bella could continue to hold on to him, but the girl hastened to assure him that everything was fine now. They set off at a gallop again. Bella realized that it wouldn't be so easy for her to sit on the horse. With another nervous laugh, she asked permission to hold on to the Duke a little longer. Rayan allowed her to do so with a smile. They rode on horseback across a flowering meadow under the rays of the sun. Then the Duke stopped his horse and dismounted. "We've arrived," he said, and offered his hand to Bella. "Thank you," said the girl, leaning on the Duke's arm to dismount as well. A moment later, she was already running across a flowering meadow and exclaiming that it was so beautiful here. She was collecting flowers into a bouquet. Bella said that the dandelion seeds looked just like snow. It was so incredibly beautiful. She asked the Duke, who was watching her, if it really did look like snowfall. The Duke looked at her with some curiosity, and then he said that perhaps it was quite pleasant to watch. Bella blushed and apologized for seeming to get too carried away. Rayan said that she didn't have to adhere to etiquette here. She could behave more freely. "True?" Bella asked again, and hastened to clarify how much freer it was possible. Rayan answered that it was up to how she usually behaved with friends. Bella said with a smile that this was excellent, and warned the Duke that he could not take his words back. He should not forget about it. The girl thought that since he treated her almost like a friend, it meant that Rayan now trusted her very much. She handed him a bouquet of plucked dandelions. She said she would show him something amazing, and then blew on a dandelion. Bella smiled and asked if it was beautiful. Rayan took the bouquet and said that yes, it was very beautiful, but he was looking at the girl herself. Then Bella wove a wreath of flowers and placed it on Rayan's head. You could run carefree among the flowers and laugh. Flower petals swirled everywhere and got tangled in her hair for Rayan and Bella to catch. They greeted the evening sitting on a rock and admiring the bright sunset. Rayan said that he was curious about what kind of life Bella had lived. The girl replied with a laugh that there was nothing interesting in this life. His lordship could fall asleep while he listened. Rayan objected that he hadn't heard it yet, so how could he know whether it would be interesting or not? Bella was surprised that he might actually be interested in this, because it would be a very long story. She said that her whole life up until now had been dedicated only to making money. She had 2 younger siblings, and since she was the eldest child, she had to grow up early. From childhood, she understood very well how hard it was for her mother. Her mother worked from morning until night, without a break, so that her family did not need anything. Because of this, her health completely deteriorated, and there was no living place left on her body, so in order for her mother to work a little less, Bella dropped out of school early and also began to work. She believed that if she earned a lot of money, all their problems would be solved. Rayan asked what happened next, but Bella couldn't tell that she simply collapsed from exhaustion, that living with thoughts of her family, she didn't even notice what state she was in. She said that her younger sister and brother could also find some kind of part-time job, but Bella was killing herself at work, not showing up at home even on her relatives' birthdays or holidays. Rayan said that he didn't know what the part-time job the girl was talking about was, but he assumed that Bella missed her family, so he could give her a week off to go home. Bella replied that, unfortunately, she wouldn't be able to meet her family right now due to personal circumstances. Therefore, Bella expressed the hope that the Lord would also sometimes find time to look around and rest, because only when the ruler himself is healthy and calm will he have the strength to take care of those around him. Rayan thought with interest about the girl's words, about this time to look around and rest. "Oh, look there!" Bella suddenly exclaimed and grabbed Rayan's hand. Rayan turned around and looked where the girl was pointing. Bella jumped to her feet, still holding the Duke's hand, and exclaimed that the sunset was truly romantic today. It was especially beautiful today. She turned to Rayan and thanked him, because today he had fulfilled her small but important wish, and now she felt very happy. "That's how it is," said Rayan, admiring the girl. They sat side by side on that big rock again, watching the sunset. A very different encounter took place on the dark streets of the city that night. Edward walked closer to the man who was waiting for him and asked why he had called him to such a place again. After all, they had already discussed everything in detail last time the bandits simply set their sights on the gold and betrayed them. Gale, who had hidden his face under a hood, replied that at the time, due to the utter confusion, he had let all these things go, but upon reflection, he found it all too suspicious. Edward asked if Gale was now suspecting him, the most loyal subject whom His Majesty valued so much. Gale exclaimed that he suspected not Edward, but the Grand Duke Rayan, who had clearly intervened and replaced all the chests. He recalled the fire in his mansion the day before. Most likely the substitution occurred then. Edward asked whether the Count had not conducted a thorough investigation into this fire, since he himself had said that it was not arson, but spontaneous combustion, and now he was making up some fairy tales. Gale indignantly exclaimed that Edward should watch his language and not call it fairy tales. Edward replied that he had bribed the bandits as planned, so the oversight of the chests was only the fault of Count Gale. They were trying to get to the bottom of the truth, but His Majesty had ordered this matter to be closed as soon as possible. Was anyone really going to go against His Majesty's will and raise this topic again? Gale suggested that the bandits might have been deliberately set on him, fearing that his rapprochement with the Emperor would undermine Edward's own position. Edward chuckled and said that Count Gale did have a rich imagination, but he could go and tell his fantasies directly to His Majesty, but he himself saw no point in listening to this nonsense any longer, so he would leave here. Edward turned and walked away, and Gale shouted at him that he was wrong to think that he couldn't do it. Edward said that he should not be disturbed about such a matter in the future, and yet this plan must have been prepared by him and His Majesty for a long time and carefully. But for some reason he acted as if all this did not concern him. He did not even look upset. Rayan and Bella had a magical evening alone in a flower meadow. Rayan said that Bella was a really special girl, and then he said that he was very interested in what was going on in her head. He wanted to check if the girl was thinking about him. After this, Rayan leaned towards her to kiss her. At that very moment, Bella woke up screaming and sat up in her own bed in the estate. What an impossible dream she just had. With what relief she realized that it had all been just a dream. In reality, this should never happen. The last thing she needed was to fall in love with a character she created herself, even if it was Ryan. The Duke stood by the large window in his bedroom that night and looked at the starry sky. He didn't understand why he couldn't get that happy smile of Bella out of his head. Bella was a woman whose identity they hadn't yet been able to even properly verify. It seemed like it was the first time in his life he had seen someone smile so radiantly, and apparently he was just nervous about his first walk in a long time. Both Bella and Ryan tossed and turned in their beds, both unable to force themselves to sleep. Morning came and Ryan appeared at the imperial palace. The emperor told him that a long time had passed since the Grand Duke had returned to the capital, so he had not given him any serious assignments, but an important matter had arisen, which he now wished to entrust to him. Ryan bowed and said that he was fully attentive to His Majesty's words. The emperor set up an office at the northwestern gate of the palace. Ryan was to receive people there and monitor their mood. Ryan thought that this place would be right at the northwest gate. The emperor asked what was the matter, whether the Duke did not like this assignment, whether he did not want to solve the problems of his subjects in the name of His Majesty. Ryan replied that everything was fine, he would obey and would not disappoint His Majesty's trust. The area in front of the northwest gate of the imperial palace was the dirtiest and poorest place in the capital, where the poor huddled. A place where brothels and homeless people were everywhere, and due to the terrible conditions, all sorts of diseases flourished here. Every morning you could see 1 or 2 corpses floating in the dirty river, and as soon as you mentioned this place, everyone would immediately close their eyes and pretend that nothing was happening. Now, Ryan and Owen went to the Emperor's Civil Affairs office, located in this place. The office was an empty, dark, and dirty room with a table and 2 chairs. Covering his nose with his hand, Owen expressed outrage at the terrible working conditions the Emperor had provided the Duke. Even though the Emperor didn't like him, the Duke was famous for his exploits in the war. Was it really possible to throw him into such a place? "Enough," Ryan said sternly, reminding them that in the capital it was necessary to watch their language. He ordered Owen to hire people to clean up the place and to prepare some essentials. Owen asked if his lordship was really going to work here, because it couldn't even be called an office, and it was obvious that the Emperor had appointed the Duke to this worthless position only to humiliate him. It was unlikely that people would actually come here. At that moment, an old woman came in and asked if the new Citizens Affairs office had opened here. She said that she heard that they help ordinary people solve their problems here. The Duke sat down at the table and invited the visitor to enter, and Owen helped her to a chair. He asked what had happened to her. The old woman answered that she had gone to buy eggs, but the merchant had taken the money and not given the goods back. She tried to object, but he only got angry and kicked her out. She asked for help because it was her granddaughter's birthday today, and she really wanted to make her some egg porridge. Ryan replied that he understood everything, but first he needed to fill out the application. The old woman said that her granddaughter was very sick. They lived in poverty and often went hungry, but she loved egg porridge so much that she wanted to cook it for her. At least today, Ryan replied that he promised that she would definitely eat egg porridge today. Owen thought he didn't understand how this could happen, since the Duke was the one who led thousands of armies on the battlefield. Several days passed like this. An impossibly long crowd of people desiring justice lined up at the doors of the administration. People were discussing how his lordship dealt with their problems. All they had to do was tell him, be it a big matter or a small one, his lordship Ryan would deal with anything. One of the people in line had lost his clothes and was going to ask the Duke to find them. Another was talking about his cat climbing a tree and the Duke saving it. Then the crowd never dried up. Everyone was trying to get into the visitor's chair. A young man with a black eye told Ryan about a man in a black cloak who had punched him. The Duke issued orders, put signatures and seals. He gave the petitioner a sealed envelope, which he told him to take to the guards, where they would help him. The visitor took the letter and bowed low. "Next," Ryan said, dealing with matters quickly and clearly. "Master," he heard suddenly. This voice was very familiar to him. "It was lunchtime," announced Bella, beaming as she stood before him with a basket in her hands. After this, the girl returned back to the estate. She walked and thought that she had barely managed to feed him. So she will soon receive the title of nanny not only for the child, but also for Ryan himself. Bella saw one of the estate's guards and his gesture, as if he was trying to fence himself off from something. These people besieged him. They brought bread that they had baked, fresh cabbage from their garden, kittens that their cats had given birth to give to his lordship. The guard had to hold the defense at the gate and explain to the persistent citizens that the residence of the Grand Duke was not a passageway. Bella didn't understand what was going on here. The guard begged Bella to help them somehow because all these people wanted to thank his lordship, and he did not have the authority to let them in. Bella replied that she understood everything and asked to follow her. It was time to demonstrate the spreadsheet skills she had honed over 10 years of office life. Finally, evening came. The sky above the estate was covered with clouds. Rayan put his spoon down on the table. He was sitting in the refectory at a large table, with Alan standing next to him, who noticed that the owner looked very tired and that he clearly needed to go to bed early today. Rayan replied that it couldn't be done that way. He had to study the reports on river water pollution. Then she asked how Aaron's day was. Alan replied with a smile that the young master had been training hard today. Bella was looking after him, so his lordship could rest easy. The Duke's attention was drawn to a folder lying on the table, and he asked what it was. Alan replied that these were documents that Bella had drawn up recently. Townspeople had been coming to thank the Duke and give him gifts. It was a register that briefly recorded information about the donors and a list of gifts. Apparently, Bella was worried that someone might pass on dangerous items. Alan said that this list would immediately indicate who gave what, and if anything suspicious were discovered, this would be very helpful in the investigation. Alan suggested that Bella was very attentive to his lordship and everything that concerned him. Rayan took it upon himself to study all the notes made by Bella. This was not the level of a simple nanny. It was too obvious that she had received a good education. Alan asked what the owner was talking about. Rayan replied that in that case, from now on, when he was engaged in state affairs, it would be worthwhile to call Bella sometimes and ask her opinion. The next day, the estate was in a state of bustle. The entire staff was rushing to restore perfect order before the owner returned. Alan was asking where Bella was. When the girl was found, the butler told her that the Andrea festival was about to begin, so it was necessary to take care of food, and under no circumstances could she forget the most important thing, rice cakes. Andrea's festival, Bella said in amazement. Would she really see the festival she had invented with her own eyes? Hundreds of years ago, a female knight named Andrea led her knights to exterminate magical beasts in the middle of a harsh winter. They fought monsters, overcoming the bitter cold, and the people established a holiday to honor their sacrifice and courage. While in ambush, the knights ate rice cakes to satisfy their hunger, so eating these cakes became the main tradition of the festival that was the history of this holiday. But Bella herself had no idea how to cook these rice cakes. She suddenly remembered Evelyn and told the butler that she dreamed of at least once again looking into the kitchen. Bella herself would look after the young master and prepare other dishes, so she thought that Evelyn should be entrusted with baking the cakes. Alan replied that she could do as she saw fit, as long as there were no problems with the preparation. Bella thought it was great. If she gave Evelyn such a chance, she would surely decide that her moment had come and reveal her true intentions. Meanwhile, Bella herself will keep a close eye on her and find out what exactly she is planning. Bella found Evelyn in the garden, sweeping leaves. Evelyn asked what was the matter and said that Bella herself could see how hard she was cleaning and was busy now. Bella said she had been watching her the whole time, and it seemed to her that she was genuinely remorseful. So she suggested to the butler that Evelyn be in charge of making rice cakes for the Andrea festival, and he agreed. "True," Evelyn exclaimed and rushed to thank Bella. Bella said that in gratitude, Evelyn should simply try her best. Evelyn assured that she would definitely do this. Meanwhile, at Count Kamara's estate, Edward entered a large room where some kind of indecent drinking party was taking place. The men had a good time with wine and in the company of half-dressed girls. Edward looked at the whole scene with a very gloomy look. One of those present called out to him, and he turned around abruptly. The man who addressed him was his brother, Theodore Kamar, who asked why his magnificent brother Edward was in such a hurry to leave as soon as he entered the house. Edward replied that he had not yet completed the business entrusted to him by His Majesty, so it was indeed time for him to go. Herbert Kamar, Edward's father, stated that Edward should have greeted him and his brother, but it was simply impolite not to do so. Edward remained silent and only grew even more gloomy. He clenched his fists, restraining himself. Bowing, he said that he was only trying not to interfere. Theodore noticed that Edward was said to be a man of hobbies, and rumors were circulating that he was having fun with the emperor, surrounded by women, so it was unclear why he was putting on such a noble and neat act in front of him and his father. Edward replied that he simply did not want to spoil His Majesty's mood. Theodore said that he remembered that Edward was the emperor's watchdog, a very devoted mongrel. Edward did not value his family at all, but if the emperor ordered him to die, he would die without a second thought. After drinking the wine, Theodore gritted his teeth. Then he shouted that Edward was pouring so much dirt on him and his father in front of the emperor, he wanted to know what kind of story Edward had told His Majesty, since he was still rejecting their requests in audience. Edward replied that he had never mentioned anything about the two of them to His Majesty. Theodore asked who his brother was trying to deceive. He called him his perfect brother, and then suggested that Edward thought that if he prevented Theodore from meeting the emperor, he could become the next Count of Kamar. "I'm dreaming," Theodore said with disdain, reminding him that Edward was nothing more than a bastard born of a whore. At that moment, Edward swung and hit his brother in the face. He said that he could put up with anything, but he would never allow anyone to insult his mother. "How dare you!" Herbert also shouted. Edward replied that his brother had just insulted his mother. Hadn't he heard that? "Shut up!" Herbert shouted at this. He stated that he didn't even dare open his mouth, because Herbert didn't want to hear anything about this shameless girl. She was a disgrace to the Kamar family. Edward was just as much of a disgrace. Rotten blood will never become purer. Edward grinned evilly and said that it was all funny. It turns out that the father misses this shameless girl with her rotten blood so much that even today he sent people to look for her. Perhaps it would be worth asking if the stepmother knows about this. "What did you say?" Herbert roared and ordered the guards to beat this bastard half to death. The guards surrounded Edward and pointed their blades at him. Edward asked what they would do if he really did die, and whether they could justify the murder of the emperor's right hand. "Oh, you puppy," Herbert growled. He said that his eyes would never see such a son, and then ordered him to get out of the house immediately. "Yes, sir," Edward replied and headed towards the door. Herbert said that he really couldn't even kill the bastard. Theodore asked his father to calm down. He reminded him that he had planted a spy in the estate of the Grand Duke Rayan. This man would kill Rayan during the Andrea festival, and as soon as he died, the Kamaris would win the trust of His Majesty, and then some Edward would become a nobody to them. Edward had not yet gone far when he heard these words. He realized that the Kamars also had a spy in the Grand Duke's estate, but he simply could not allow Rayan to die at their hands.